If you enjoy this podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe.
Special thank you to Landmark Coffee Roasters, a sponsor for this podcast. If you haven't tasted their coffee, you got to go check it out. Some of the best beans in Southern California. LandmarkRoasters.com. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Chaddick in the Stoke House. Dude, welcome to the show.
Thanks, brother. Good to be here.
Mike, you are currently the senior pastor of Image Church in San Juan Capistrano, California. You're born in Southern California, but you're raised in the Bay Area.
Yes.
San Francisco. Mike, you are a Bible nerd. You are the in-house scholar amongst the band of brothers, pastors that we hang with. You always have a great way of articulating difficult theology and cultural issues into this plain English, really bringing clarity. I love that about you. You grew up as a pastor's kid in the Calvary Chapel movement.
I did.
Immersed in the church. This grew your love for the scriptures. You love education. And you have more degrees than I could ever dream of and to be trained in. Just give me an ounce. I want the Matrix thing to happen. Like I just see you pull the chip out and just drop it in the back of my head. You earned a certificate from Calvary Chapel Bible College, a degree from Orange Coast College, ministry degree from Vanguard University, bachelor's, Veritas Evangelical Seminary, M.T.S, Fuller Seminary, M.A. We received also the Frederick
Buechner
Award for excellence in writing. I didn't know this. And you're presently working on the Doctor of Ministry, a D.Min from Western Seminary in Portland.
D.Min, not D.Min, just
not
for
D-min.
Everyone to know. Yeah, my kids,
Yes.
my kids make fun of, Daddy, are you going to be a demon? No, D.Min.
Yes, a doctorate of ministry. Amazing. You're also a beast in workouts. You got all the guns that all the pastors dream about. You've been a good friend, man. You've come to preach for me at Legacy. You are married to a beautiful bride for 18 years, and you got 6 kids. Brother, welcome to the show.
Bro, so good to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, love... Well, I remembered why we don't get together as much as I would like. Southern California traffic.
Yes.
It is a reality.
Yeah.
And yeah, I looked at the mileage. It was only, 80 miles. That's
Right.
not that bad.
Yeah.
If you're from the Midwest, you think, oh, well, that's 60 minutes.
Right.
It's like, no, that was almost 3 hours, bro. One way.
Thank you, 405, right?
Yeah, man. It's a part of our culture, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean.
You're in South OC.
We are.
One of my favorite places on the entire planet.
Yes. Now, I'm trying to remember. I think you said, were you down there? Did you live down there? There was some connection. You were in that area, San Juan, San Clemente, something.
Yeah, first time down there, I'm probably like 17, 18 years old with my buddies paddling out at San Clemente Pier trying to figure out how to surf. And I'll never forget it. We paddled out T Street. We're like, we're going to T Street. You know, we drove an hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half from Riverside. And we paddled out. It was a storm, dude. Like, this is like, surfers know, like, when it's storming and raining, like, you generally just don't go out in the water.
Not a good time to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's choppy and there's, like, no waves. It's just massive. So we went down there and we paddled out. We're at T Street. And literally the wind and the power of the waves take us, like, half a mile down the beach. And I literally caught one wave that day, and it's just like this giant wave just like shows up like in this white capped waves. Like it's just, just choppy and bouncing. Pops up, I paddle into it, and I'm just like almost like boogie boarding down the face of the wave. Like, what am I doing? And of course, fall. But me and the guys get pulled all the way down the beach, and we get out of the water, and we're like, "Yeah, dude,
let's do it again."
Yeah, like we were on cloud 9. So, anyways. Yeah, surfing is the connection to South Orange County, then San Onofre Beach, and started doing a lot of longboarding with Mike Jonker, one of the pastors at Harvest. And then we planted Harvest OC, obviously, in Irvine. And so,
what year was that? I remember it happening, but I don't remember the year that would have been.
Let's see. It had to be probably 3 or 4 years before I planted the church. So that would be approximately like 13 years ago.
Okay.
Maybe around, let's see, we were 2014. So maybe it started up around like 2008, 2009.
Okay.
Maybe.
Okay.
We were doing Bible study at Free Chapel in Irvine.
I remember that.
It was a Thursday night study.
Yes.
Greg was renting that.
Yes.
Pastor Greg was renting that. And I was head usher down there.
Oh, wow.
I was helping with the ushering, and then I ended up doing the high school ministry. Anyways, but yeah, those are the connections. So tons of time in Orange County, 4th of July's and all that stuff. But you were actually in South OC.
Yes.
And I was trying to remember back today, Mike, like I have recollection to my first memories of your name coming around, but I was trying to remember, like, is the first time that we actually met as of recent, like in with the brothers, with the pastors?
I think so. Although same thing. I feel like I knew of you beforehand.
Right.
Obviously not as closely connected as we are now, but I worked at Calvary Costa Mesa.
Yes.
For almost 10 years total.
Wow.
And you know what I mean? Like, as in the Calvary world, if you work there, you're kind of plugged in to that broader network, and you hear names, you know, even at other churches out in Riverside, Greg's Church, Skip's Church, whoever, you know, and you know of people. Yes. So I think that's probably minimum. I mean, I wouldn't doubt conferences, whether it was youth workers or
that's right,
you know, something like that. Probably may have met. I don't know, but definitely it's been a blessing to kind of get connected with you more on a friendship level.
Absolutely. Were you serving at the Bible College, Calvary Chapel Bible College as well? Any season?
So I went to the Bible College 2001, 2003 as a student. As soon as I graduated, I started teaching, actually. I was asked to come back to the
Bible College,
to the Maui campus.
Okay, at the Maui campus.
And teach. And then even after, so I worked as a high school teacher at Costa Mesa High School, Calvary High, for 3 years, taught sophomore Bible 6 times a day to 15-year-olds.
Wow.
And then, but as soon as I got hired as a pastor, I started part-time teaching again at the Bible College. And I did that off and on for 13 years.
Wow.
Actually.
So that is where I think I heard your name for sure then. It was like Mike Chaddick. He's a professor over there, a teacher over there at the Bible College. And my wife actually went to school there for a semester.
Really?
Yeah. Huh?
Which one? The Murrieta?
Murrieta, yeah. So I think...
What year?
Oh, sheesh. Okay. So let's see. We were married in 2011.
Hopefully you can get that one right.
And
if not, edit that out.
Hello, Dave. Can you fact check that?
I mean, babe, I feel like forever. I mean, not that it was dragging on. I mean, just
yeah. October 1st, 2011, we were married. And I met her 2 years prior to that. So that would have been 2009.
Okay.
Probably right around there.
Wow.
2009 in the fall there. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So she went there for a semester, and I was her reference to get in.
Wow.
I was her pastoral reference to get in.
You're like, I highly recommend.
I highly recommend this girl. She will excel above all other students, guaranteed. Yeah, no. So we snuck her in, and anyway, she did that. So, but no, your name was floating around a lot because we knew a ton of kids who went to Bible College. We were sending them there from Harvest. And but you grew up in the Bay Area.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So
born and raised in Southern California, or born in Southern California.
No, yeah.
Sorry.
Technically born in Newport Beach, Hoag Hospital, but I totally grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I kind of miss the whole surf culture in the youth because I mean, and again, I think there's more of a, you would probably know this, I think there's more of a surf culture there now than there was when I was growing up in the early 80s.
Right.
Back then, it's like butt freezing cold and great white sharks.
Right.
So it's like not super amazing.
Yeah. Like Mavericks took off and all that stuff.
It just, it wasn't, there wasn't that culture.
Right.
So it just wasn't something, I knew some people that surf, but it was like not a thing.
Right.
It just wasn't what most people did. Yeah. So I grew up, pastor's kid. So PK, my dad was a Calvary pastor my entire life.
They get saved in the Jesus movement?
Yeah. So he got saved in the Jesus movement. At first, he was in the Assemblies of God. And he ran a halfway house in Long Beach for people coming off heroin and getting out of prison and all that. So hardcore in the trenches ministry. And then, he was, he actually went to Melodyland School of Theology.
I know this.
So a lot of people aren't familiar with it. If you're old school, you know.
Melodyland, yeah. That's here in LA.
It was, so it's gone, but it was near Disneyland.
Yeah.
It's now, it was torn down.
Across the street, like directly?
It's where the Garden Walk is now. They tore it down. But it was it was like one of the epicenters of the Jesus movement in the 60s. Ralph Wilkerson was the pastor.
Right.
And they started a school of theology. And one of the teachers there that I think a lot of Calvary people would know is Walter Martin, who famously wrote Kingdom of the Cults. Yep. So my dad started going to school there and getting trained and equipped. Did
he meet Walter Martin?
I believe he had him in a class.
Wow.
And again, it was totally happening place to be. And then I think, definitely having been saved in the Pentecostal charismatic side of Christianity, but then, doing some of the biblical training and stuff. So emphasizing again, the intellectual and rational side of the faith, he started to kind of feel uncomfortable with some of the perceived excesses in the Pentecostal movement. And that's what drew him to Calvary, because he felt that it had a good balance of emphasis on charismatic, Pentecostal, gifts for today, that kind of stuff. But emphasis on scripture, the Bible, doctrine, theology. So he ended up working for Pastor Chuck in the early 70s at Calvary Costa Mesa. So he was on staff there.
Wow.
And he was the singles pastor.
Really?
I just thought of this the other day. I actually ended up doing the singles there as well.
Wow.
Way later.
Crazy.
But then Chuck sent him out to plant a church up in the Napa Valley, wine country in the North San Francisco Bay. And then that's where I grew up, up until I was about 21 years old. So those were my formative years.
So you watched your dad plant a church?
Yeah. So again, when he planted it, I would have been like 1. My recollection starts probably around 5 or 6. So the church is thriving. It's going doing very well. My dad was planting churches all over the Bay Area.
Wow.
He was
What's your dad's name?
Mike Chaddick also.
Mike Chaddick.
W. Mike W. Chaddick.
Are you the oldest?
So just me and my brother.
You and your brother?
Yeah, we got one sibling.
Yeah.
Tiny family.
Yeah.
I'm older by 2.5 years.
Okay.
Interesting story there, though. My younger brother got saved 2.5 years before me.
Huh.
So it's kind of funny.
Wow.
Yeah. So my younger brother's older than me in the Lord.
Yeah.
So really cool relationship. We're friends.
Love it.
But at the same time, I look up to him.
Yes.
And respect him. And definitely the Lord used him just in encouraging me towards making a commitment to Christ. But grew up there. Church was thriving, happening. People were getting saved. D.Min and Kyle got saved.
Wow.
At my dad's church.
Are you kidding me?
No.
Dude, that's awesome.
Actually, I remember as kids, went to church.
Modesto?
I think
Calvary Modesto? Is that?
They were in Napa.
Okay.
And then they moved out to, I believe they were involved with that.
Yeah.
Helping that get started.
D.Min and Kyle, when he preaches, he reminds me of some ancient king. Like he's come back from 1,000 years ago, and he has that voice. Yeah.
He does. Very much so. Great expositor.
I came to the Lord in your dad's church.
Yes.
Very cool.
And so I definitely remember it being an exciting, vibrant thing. Really looked up to and respected my dad. And then I would say it was a good experience as a kid. It definitely changed later. And I think, it's one of those things where whatever your upbringing is, I believe in the sovereignty and providence of God. So it's I grew up where I needed to grow up.
Yes.
Good and the bad, by the way.
Yep.
But I do think that, when you look back on the past, there's a way of honoring and respecting your parents and those who came before you, and yet at the same time learning from their mistakes and not repeating them. And I think sometimes either people get in especially younger people, and I did this to an extreme where you all you see is the bad, and you just criticize it and throw it away, and you want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and all that. But then there's also the other extreme, which is trying to sanitize mistakes and even sins, and make it like it's fine and nothing needs to change. That's not honoring actually either. Because again, who are we honoring? At the end of the day, hopefully it's the Lord.
Yes.
And I think there's a way of doing both, human respect towards those gods used in our lives. But, looking back, I think, like I would say this about my dad, when he was healthy, and the health thing becomes pretty significant.
Got it.
He was gone all the time, bro. So being a pastor's kid, if he was healthy, he was gone serving the Lord. So serving the Lord and serving his family didn't, coincide in a way I feel. And again, this is my opinion now.
Sure.
And I've made changes based on that I feel were healthy.
Yeah.
Because I think and I think what I get from him, from others of his generation, as well as just studying charismatic Pentecostal cultures and churches more broadly, there is a little bit of a workaholism where, and nobody would say, I think I'm being saved by my works or anything. They know that's a heretical doctrine. I shouldn't believe it. But again, it's not a question of whether you believe it intellectually so much, but practically.
Totally.
Are you?
Yeah.
Like, man, if I don't, burn out for the Lord, I don't even know if I'm saved. It's like, man, are you able to rest in the identity that's given to you freely in Christ? Or are you trying to build a name? Are you trying to build something for yourself, build a kingdom? It's like, it's cool Jesus includes us, but he's the one building his kingdom.
Amen.
So I think, looking back, again, super fond memories, vibrant church, great things. And it was just a cool time in the Napa Valley. I don't know, for people who, there's actually a movie about this. It's called, what is it? Bottle something, but it was actually a movie about the world wine competition where a non-European wine won the world, and it put Sonoma Napa on the map.
Wow.
Yeah, and blew up. So like they moved up there right at that time when all of a sudden this kind of nowhere podunk place becomes super popular, famous. That's when all the money, all
world
these
famous
wineries, the culinary arts, just everything starts taking off. And God's, again, in his providence, they just happen to be up there around that time. So things were booming.
So would you speak a little more to that? We are pastors, we have kids, our kids are PKs.
Yeah.
How do you experienced it growing up, and you said you've already made changes in your life on how to, you're adjusting on the fly, like you're trying to figure this out in real time. But this is a temptation amongst all pastors. Like it seems to not leave us, that you're constantly battling with this balance between how much do I serve the church and the people? How do I make sure my family's okay? The church will never stop. There will always be needs.
Yeah.
There will always be a demand. Yeah. And you can burn the candle at both ends very quickly. And oftentimes the chanting of the crowd is you're not doing enough.
Yeah.
And then the chanting of your wife, at home or your kids are home is you're not doing enough. And you're like, how do I navigate this? How do I work through this? Maybe some practical things, or maybe some things in the text that you've discovered. I don't know, anything that you'd like to say. I'd love to hear it.
Well, I think, again, your identity is in Christ, not your work. And I actually think pastors have a harder time with that than anybody.
Could you unpackage that a bit more? Yeah,
I think, again, the question of identity, which it's always been an issue, even from the garden, if you think about it this way. Like the serpent is challenging Eve's sense of identity, right? You'll be like God if. It's like, well, wait a minute, aren't you already made it, right? There's this challenging of you're not enough.
Wow.
You could be more. Don't rest in the identity God's given you, know. But then I think obviously what we're looking at today in modern Western culture, and this is only emphasized, I think, it's not the root of it. It's emphasized in like the transgender movement and all that. Like, what are people looking for? They're looking for identity.
Right, totally.
And it used to be, most of the history of the world, people found it outside. So they found it in nations, right? Like I'm a member of this nation. They found it in community. I'm a member of this, city or town or whatever it is, and you found it in your work, your identity. I'm a cobbler, I'm a carpenter, And then family, right? So you always, and then you always, or even in your kids, right? So you always found it outside. But one of the interesting changes is the shift from looking for fulfillment and identity outwardly to trying to find it inwardly. And so people, that's why people are saying things like, I know I have the body of a male, but I feel like what you're saying is you don't trust the voices outside of you. You don't even trust physical, concrete realities as we know it.
Right.
And again, but here's the thing: before we rush in and go, no, that's wrong, don't turn. But ask why they're doing that, because that's actually just that's a strange cultural phenomenon that, from my understanding, has never happened before in human history. There's been rampant homosexuality before in the history of the world. There's even been some kind of transgender type things.
Sure, dressing up as women, or
and like
dressing up as men.
Native American two-spirit kind of thing.
Yep.
But never was it so pressed upon people as a solution to identity, to individual identity and fulfillment. It's just that part of it is unique. So I think there's always this longing for, fulfillment in terms of identity. Who am I? And kind of the fundamental biblical one is, works, right? Like being works-based, rather than I'm saved by Christ and what he has done, I'm going to justify myself and think about that. And we normally unpack that just in terms of, okay, am I standing before God? Am I righteous on the basis of this or that? But think of it more practically. What drives you to do what you do? And I think sometimes deep down, even Christians and pastors, I might say, yes, I'm saved by the righteousness of Christ, by grace, through faith alone, apart from works, so that no one can boast. I say that. But practically, there's an unease. I feel that if I'm home for a minute, if I'm enjoying my wife for a minute, if I'm just being with my kids, going to a jiu-jitsu tournament. My youngest son just was in a jiu-jitsu tournament.
Nice.
He got a submission by Kimura.
Yeah.
He cranked that arm. Not that daddy approves of making other little kids
for
cry.
God's glory, baby.
Be a warrior for God. But, I think there's always that temptation to say I'm not doing enough.
Yeah.
And I got to justify my position as a pastor. I got to justify it being a vocation, a job, and then of course implicit in that, whether you think about that or not, is who am I trying to justify this in the eyes of? Because I think we don't even we're so just
who are we trying to please?
We're so busy and active. I don't even think we self-reflect enough to even know what in the world is driving what I'm doing. We're simply looking at what we're doing, i.e., ministry, and assuming, therefore, it's good.
Wow.
But idolatry is not simply what you're doing, it's your motivation, right? It's actually doing any good thing for a glory other than God's glory, for doing something other than, salvation by grace through faith. That's actually from grace, and it's gratitude compelling me towards whatever I'm doing. And I think if it's of gratitude, then rest, Shabbat, the kind of a principle of Sabbath, not a legalistic rule, but a principle. It should be there, boundaries, because you're not infinite. So why are you acting like it? And to be finite means to have boundaries. So, and I think, like I said, good. Pastors, and again, being a PK, I almost feel, and my dad died of cancer 20 years ago, so I can't follow up with him on a lot of this stuff. So I only had a couple of year window after becoming a professing believer and starting to go to Bible college where I was able to talk to him. But, questions I would have for him and those, I do feel like they were trying to justify themselves through their ministry. The more Bible studies I teach, the more churches I plant, the more conferences I say yes to, the more plane trips I take across the world, the more people, but then the weird thing is you can do all that and then lose your family. And I'm not, I think the principle of what does it profit a man, to gain the world but lose his soul? What does it profit a man to grow the biggest ministry but lose his wife and kids?
So good.
You know what I mean? I think,
good.
And so anyway, I think one of the ways of showing that you're trusting in the Lord and not in your works, that you're trusting in grace and not in your works, is boundaries.
Yeah.
And rest, and the principle of Shabbat. Like I said, because I know we're not under the law. I think I kind of discarded some of the wisdom of the law that's still there to be a guide for new covenant Christians. So I think that's a big thing, is just recognizing, because and by the way, I'm not saying this because like I haven't done it.
Sure.
I've done these things, like even in because I went through years where, like, my wife called me out. She's like, you don't do anything fun anymore at all.
Wow. Yeah.
You don't. Because there was one point where in the church I was working, she counted the hours because she said I was working too much, and I said I didn't believe her. And the reason I said I didn't believe her is the results hadn't got exactly where I wanted them to be.
Wow.
So to me, you couldn't work enough. There was no number of hours that was enough unless certain results came. And so she this is my wife. I married a strong-headed woman on purpose. Yes, God bless her.
Amen.
But she actually tracked me.
Wow.
And wrote down all my hours.
Yeah.
And she showed me on a pad of paper.
Oh, wow.
Do you know how much you worked this week? And I was like, no, 83 hours. You worked 83 hours. And the irony was I didn't believe her, and then she actually had a breakdown of where it was, and she was right. It was 83 hours. And in my time off, I was reading books on theology and catching up on, videos of things that I thought would help me be a better pastor and a more effective preacher, whatever. So I've done it myself, and I also partly justified it, even when I got a glimpse it wasn't good. But it's for a season. I'm young. But the problem, and there's some truth to that, right? Like, you're young, you put in the hardware, you can run, and then later you can kind of rest a little bit.
Right.
But the problem is it actually can become a part of who you are. And then even if it were true, and I'm not sure it ever was, but even if it were true, yes, in your young years, you just do that. You work the 7 days a week, you do what you got to do. But I also find you become the kind of person who cannot rest, who cannot shut off, who feels lazy, and the laziness was again this idea that I'm a human doing rather than a human being, like not resting in the grace of God. And I think that was like the struggle for Israel when God gave them a Sabbath, because you think that Sabbath was meant to be a gift, right? Like, it wasn't supposed to be some crushing, horrible burden,
right?
And God says, okay, in the wilderness, collect manna on these days, and on this day you won't collect.
Right.
Give you a double portion so that you'll be good.
Right.
And then what happened? They're like, yeah, but if I rest, maybe we'll miss it. Maybe next week won't be enough. What if people don't come back to church next week? What if I haven't done enough Bible study? It's like I was doing the same thing, And so I actually think the ceasing, right, Shabbat, like stop, just stop. And I feel like some of us need to hear that from God. Just stop, bro.
Wow.
Like put it down, it down, stop, calm down, rest.
Right.
And even just enjoy, enjoy what God's done, and enjoy, and remind yourself of the fact that even though what you're doing matters and God's using you and you are responsible to do so, at the same time, it's all dependent on Him, not you. Like, if He decides not to hold together your brain cells so that you can form a coherent sentence, He can do that.
Right.
And by the way, He humbles many of us as we get older and you go through life. And I saw my grandparents, wonderful Christian people on my dad's side, and they both got dementia. Wonderful people, served the Lord, loved the Bible, literally lost the ability to know who they were. So, like, even the ability to think straight is like the grace of God. And so I think having healthy rhythms and boundaries is actually a way of helping the gospel to form our identity. That before I do anything for God, I must first let Christ serve me. And like, even that language, I think, can be hard to hear. Like, Christ needs to serve you. You have to allow Christ. Well, it's literally what Jesus did with His whole life. It's what He did on the cross. And then the night before He was betrayed, right, He goes to wash. And Peter's reaction is kind of like ours. No, Jesus, don't serve me. Unless you let me serve you, you actually can't serve me. You have no part in my ministry. Yeah, you can't do anything. So I think, and again, I think that should be like daily rhythms of that, right? But at the same time, I think and we could maybe talk about details, because I do think things have changed. In the Old Testament, it was 1 day, and you could argue it should be. So minimally, I think you'd say 1 day. But they also didn't have electricity. So when it was dark, you couldn't work. We now can work 24 hours a day. So I would argue And again, not saying it has to be 2 days but you know what I'm saying? Like there has to be some self-imposed stop time, which I didn't have for years.
Yes.
At this time, because you can always say there's more to be done. There's more to be done. There's more to be done.
Yep.
And I don't know if you find this, but as a married man with big family, what the best time slots are for people in the church is the worst times for my family.
Totally.
Oh
yeah.
And so I was adapting for the sake of everybody else and not my family.
Yep.
And I actually interviewed I won't name him, but an older, wiser pastor who's been around a long time. I interviewed him for one of my papers, and like he basically, like in a way, it was like a loving rebuke of that model. And he's like, no, you let people know when you're free to meet with them, and you put your family first.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, but these people need me, or they need to talk to their pastor. He's like, let me ask you this. If they go to make an appointment with their dentist, do they tell their dentist when they're coming in?
Totally.
Or do they say, nope, I have next opening is next week at 3 o'clock.
And it's not 7 p.m. at night either.
No, it's their time slot. They tell you.
Yeah, it's like 1 in the afternoon.
Said ironically, and again, I would say there's a good mode. Like we want to have a servant's heart, right? Like I don't want to be prideful and be like, oh, I'm so good, you can only come. I don't want to have that attitude. No. But having worked through that, it is wise to set those boundaries and priorities. And at some point, you could technically have a servant's heart and yet have a mind of a fool.
Yeah.
And God doesn't want that.
Right.
He wants the servant's heart for sure, but at the same time, wisdom.
Yes.
Wisdom to live in a way that accords with God's grace.
That's so good, Mike. I love what your wife said. What a good word. Like you're not having fun anymore. Like
no movies, no TV, no Call of Duty, nothing, bro. Yeah, no sports. Sports.
And it's like, but this happens to a lot of pastors, a lot of people in ministry. We're so caught up. It's sad. Jesus had the oil of gladness dumped upon him. Like he surely was having a blast the whole time, and he was serious. He loved God. He loved his Father. He was doing the ministry, but he was only busy about his Father's business. And then he's like, I'm going away from the crowds.
Yep.
And I'm just going to go hang out on the mountain for a couple of days. Like, what? You can't do that? Like
at the most seemingly inopportune ministry time.
Yeah, it's like we only get 3.5 years, okay, of public eye. Like you better get on it. Like here, we want to see more miracles. And he's like, no thanks. Like I got to go be with my. What appointment do you have? You got some big thing? I got to go be with my Father for 3 days, and that's all I got to do. I don't have a wife. I don't have kids. I'm just going to go pray. It's like, what? But there's this thing in ministry, where we get applauded for the ministry that we do. We get applauded for the work that we do. It's performance driven. We don't get applauded for the time we spend with our wife. We don't get applauded for the time we spend with our kids. And no one knows that. And so sadly, we are pulled away from our wife and kids often. And then, yes, people, just as you pointed out, will demand, well, how in the world am I supposed to meet with you? And it's like, well, these are my time frames that I can meet. Well, it's like, yeah, but I got to work. And it's like, I know, I got to work too. And I have days off and I have nights off just like you do. And there is some reason built into the congregant in which the pastor must be on at all times of the day and never be able to take any time off. And I don't think it's malicious. I just think it's like, well, you're my spiritual doctor and I need you at times, and so you got to be there. And we know that is part of the ministry. We do have to show up and we do have to be there, especially in times of emergency. But at the end of the day, if a man can't shepherd his own home, how can he shepherd the flock of God entrusted to him? That's one of the qualifications. You literally lose your qualification if you don't shepherd your own home. And even if it doesn't happen, formally, you lose your qualification. Your wife will make sure you lose that qualification, right? Your kids will go sideways, and you mentally and spiritually and eternally will carry that turmoil into the ministry, and it makes it 10 times harder to minister. And so I just love that you're pointing this out, Mike. I mean, what clarity, because these are the secret things that a lot of people in ministry are struggling with and working through and trying to figure out how to set boundaries, trying to figure out how to keep their marriage healthy, keep a good relationship with their kids. If I lead all these people to Jesus, my own kids don't come to Christ.
Well, it's a sad thing that the best years I had with my dad were the last few years of his life because he was too sick to do any of that. Like it shouldn't have to be that way. You shouldn't have to be hospitalized and bedridden to finally have quality time.
Do you remember that as a kid, like just sitting here, like, dang, Dad's got to go do more church, like
throw
the ball around or something.
I noticed it, like, obviously there wasn't like self-reflection at a young age, but I simply missed my dad, and I would be at events where other kids' dads were there and mine was gone.
Got it. Yeah.
Because my dad was serving the Lord. And again, I wouldn't have like been bitter towards the ministry or anything like that at that point.
Yeah.
But obviously, you put one penny in the bank, and you do that a million times, that adds up.
Yeah.
So I think I started to eventually, especially the teenage years, which are, difficult.
And no knock against your dad or men in the ministry who are trying to figure this out. Yeah. It's like, I'm sure his heart was for the Lord, trying to serve the Lord. It's just this pressure we're trying to describe.
Well, he was following examples he knew.
Yes.
And I think even as a father, one reason it probably didn't hit him is in many ways he was doing better than his father. Like his father wasn't, I don't think he became a believer until way later. And they were both physically abusive, but they were part of the World War II generation, lived through the Great Depression.
Sure.
It was you know what I mean? That was a hard generation. And once again, we're in that same position where there's a lot to criticize, and honestly, we should, if for no other reason, so we don't repeat it. But at the same time, you also have to understand many of them did the best with what they had,
Totally.
So I think my dad was following what many pastors were following.
Yes.
Those were the examples put forward to him. So I think between the fact, like if I put myself in his shoes, I'm doing far better. Like he never abused us. My dad never abused either of us, even when he probably should have. Because like we were both punk teenage kids. Never did. When he was there, he was a kind, loving man.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? So he was a good guy. There was no question that he loved us. Never doubted that till I was a teenager, but I'd say that was my fault.
Sure.
That was me, not him. But again, I think the example of the absenteeism and even somehow that sacrificing your family was a virtue. I think that was a shared cultural thing. And I've even noticed, having met a lot of through the schooling, because that was a lot of people outside of the charismatic Pentecostal world. Sure. Not all church cultures are that way. Not all, particularly charismatic Pentecostal cultures. Yeah. There is it seems to be much more likely that you're going to lack boundaries, that you are going to be absent from your family, and that however it's communicated or understood, somehow, some way, you're kind of earning a little bit of something by your busyness, by you're justifying some sense of whether it's having your job, whether it I really don't know all the depths of what it was, but I do know it seems to be a shared cultural phenomena, because I had friends in denominations, and it was different, and it's not like they couldn't have that, but it was more, they had been around for centuries. They have a clear pathway. Here's who we look for. Here's how you become a pastor. Here's the steps you need to take in order to do that. Here's the ordination process. Here's what your job description is. Here's what you're going to do. Here's all that is laid out. So expectations are understood on both sides. Right. And even the congregation has been shaped over, decades, even generations, to know, hey, they're on, they're off, they're on, they're off. Yes. Whereas I think it's like the Jesus people, that was a new thing. Sure. And a lot of the whole Jesus movement and even counterculture, right? It's kind of like reinventing the wheel a little bit. Right. Like, let's start something from the ground up, which is, in a way, not a bad thing. It certainly helps you get away from things that maybe weren't good in the denominations, but was everything bad, that, Christians prior to the Jesus movement figured out, was it all bad?
Right.
Personally, I don't think so.
Right.
I think there's things we can learn.
Totally.
And I don't think you have to change camps. But once again, I think you can learn, glean the best, eat the meat, leave the bone, don't throw stones.
Yeah.
Like, hey, what can I learn?
Fruit.
Cool. But hey, this is still my camp. It's still kind of my ethos, my values. It's where I was born spiritually. But I can learn, and I do feel like, because even like Assemblies of God, like I through Vanguard in the religion program, I met Assemblies of God pastors and stuff, and it sounded like it's a very similar problem there as well. So I do think there's a particular problem there, and I also think part of the charismatic movement is we emphasize gifting, right? Which is not a bad thing. That has to be there. But we also emphasize personality. And if you really emphasize personality, think about this. No one can replace you then, right? You can't just have another competent, equipped person because they're not you. They don't have your charisma. They're not the guy.
Right.
And so there's a pressure to always be available all the time because that's what they need, rather than stepping back saying, hey, I don't need you per se.
Right.
I just need somebody who's been generally called and gifted to this kind of thing to help me. So on a Saturday, it's my son's birthday, somebody needs some pastoral care. Okay, well, it doesn't have to be me. Whereas before, no, it does, because I'm the senior pastor. I'm the guy. It's like, no, do we not have any competent other mature believers that can handle this matter? It's like, yes, we do.
Right.
So why is it me? And because it tends to be, again, in charismatic cultures, not exclusively, more emphasis on the person and the personality, and therefore you kind of can't be gone because that literally cannot be replaced.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, especially reflecting on our own denomination and or non-denomination denomination.
Yes, our network.
Yes,
our movement.
Yes, our tribe. Yeah, that's a really interesting thing that I never really thought through. That the way we kind of build the church and the way that it's structured does seem to center around the personality. It's kind of part of the way that we've always done it, and it's part of the way we've always known it. So we just duplicate the process. And it's like church can't run without the lead guy being there. That's impossible. You can't do better on Sunday than the lead guy being there. It's like, what if it could?
Yeah.
That'd be pretty awesome. And that other denominations have been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
Is good to look at. So you grew up as a PK. This is part of your testimony. This is part of what not only inserted or brought Jesus into your life, but it's also what kind of pushed you away from the church for a bit. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah,
You're in the Bay Area. Is this is junior high, high school?
Yeah. I would definitely say junior high was a turning point. I think it was kind of a perfect storm of, and again, I would want everyone to know at the end of the day, like, it's my sin, my problem, my rebellion. I had to repent and come to Christ.
Yes.
However, we all have a story, and I think we should recognize the people, the forces, the conditions that really moved us in a direction. I think it's good to understand that. If for no other reason, not to repeat it again, or B, to help somebody else who might be in a similar situation. So for me, again, I wasn't raised non-Christian. I was raised in the church, Calvary Chapel in particular, from day one, knew no other church, loved Jesus, was taught the Bible. It was a good experience as a kid.
Did your mom grow up in Calvary Chapel as well?
So she met my dad at Melodyland, I think church.
Wow.
She wasn't doing the School of Theology, but she met there at the church, and she was raised in the Midwest, Illinois, nominally Christian, not really. And then she got saved when she moved out. She was a public school teacher. She moved out from Chicago to San Diego area.
Okay.
And then that's when she had her experience with the Lord and got connected to the Jesus movement and met my dad there.
Got it.
And then they got married. I can't remember if it was right before he went on staff with Pastor Chuck or if it was right after, but either way, right around that time.
Got it.
And then they moved up when I was a year old to San Francisco Bay Area. And then, it was like great experience growing up in the church. It was a real, amazing community. Like I remember, Christmas is coming up here, and I have such fond memories of all, the worshiping Christ, but just enjoying the life of the church, the community, the children's ministries, the plays we would do, all that stuff. And it was a good thing. But then I think two things started to happen that I became aware of as I got older. And that was, number one, my dad's health. It started declining.
This is junior high?
And it was more intermittent. Then eventually he got full-blown cancer and, died at 57.
Wow.
But
how old were you?
When he died, I was 24.
Okay.
I believe.
But this started around the junior
23.
high. So
he started getting sick. Like he would go through these bouts where he'd be in the hospital, but then he'd be kind of fine again for a while, and then he would go back, and they were like figuring out this whole nother side story of a lot of botched medical procedures, experimental stuff. Like not, again, right. I don't want to project my personal problems with modern medicine on people, but it wasn't good in my personal experience. I have kind of a phobia of going to doctors.
I get it.
Yeah.
I think my doctors are like mechanics, It's like if something major breaks, I'll go show up. But change the spark plugs, I got this one.
Yeah, honestly, that's why I like try to stay healthy. Like that's my thing. Yeah. It's like I'm less likely to go to a doctor than a lot of people I know. But that also means I work harder.
Yes.
Make sure I don't need to go.
Maintenance. Take care of yourself.
Because but so he was, I wrestled with the goodness of God in the context of allowing my father, who was doing so much for the kingdom, to be sick. And even in the Calvary Chapel world, there was the idea, kind of Job's friends kind of a thing. If God's allowing you to be sick and you're starting not to be able to do what you were doing, must be something wrong. You must not be, you know what I mean? Like a little bit of latent health wealth thing, not full blown, but kind of there a little bit. So there was, and I wrestled with that. Like,
why is God not blessing your ministry anymore?
Yeah, because it did come to that point where, like, physically he was unable to do a lot, and then there was a church split that happened, and a healthy person who could be there all the time was able to do it. And my dad was still trying to do it, but he couldn't do as much. And so I think wrestling with how could God be good and let the godliest man I know who's serving God's people, leading God's people, suffer and be in pain.
Wow.
And then that got complicated and then all these Christians, they bailed on my dad. Like he would do the midnight counseling thing. This marriage is falling apart, or this woman's claiming she got abused, so they're going to help put her up in a motel while they, help get her a restraining order against this abusive guy who now threatens to kill us all. He was doing, and then those same people would up and leave when a church down the road opened a carnival or something, and so I got a little bit like bitter towards what I call church people, not Christians per se, but just church people. I don't know whether they're Christians or not. I just know they went to church and some of them were horrible people.
Right.
So wrestled with God allowing my dad to be sick, and then just hypocrisy in the church. And then I started realizing there's a role for a pastor's kid that's expected. And it started to be the case. People would gossip about me and my brother. Honestly, at that age, I don't think we were really doing anything like horrible. Just, maybe being a little obnoxious in youth group or something, But then that word would get spread and all that, and then it would cause problems.
You're not allowed to do that.
Yeah, you're not allowed to be a kid.
Yeah,
you're not. So, and again, I'll kind of the expectation somehow the pastor's kid is supposed to be unusual. Like you're not supposed to be a normal kid.
Yeah, like it's okay. Like it's like, the youth pastor, like, well, this kid, he's got a little thing going on over here, but you know what? We're loving him, we're serving him, we're helping him. But it's like, this is the pastor's kid, and he's over here doing the exact same thing, but this is the pastor's kid. He's supposed to, it's like, wait a minute, no, he's just a kid like everybody else.
So I have a story. So I remember when Ghostbusters came out, that was like such a big thing, and I was dying to see it. But at first I wasn't allowed. My parents were, they weren't like anti-culture, but they were very cautious. They were very careful. They would always see stuff, check it out before.
Right.
But all the kids in the group got to go see it from our church, and they were all talking about it. Right. I was like, and I felt left behind. Yeah. And then finally my dad saw it. He's like, it's fine. It's not bad. There might be like one part. I'll just have you close your eyes or something. So we go see it, loved it. Yeah. Go back and I talk about it, and they're like, the pastor's kid saw it. I'm like, wait a minute. You guys literally all saw it. You were telling me about it, but then it was weird. It was like a double standard.
Yep.
It was okay for you to do it, but not for me.
Right.
So I started to realize I can't be a normal kid if I want to protect my parents from gossip, slander, which, by the way, can ultimately lead to leaving the church and stuff. So I had to kind of protect my family.
Wow.
And so church was no longer a safe place. It was a place I had to go. And I couldn't be a normal kid. And if I had problems, I no longer felt comfortable sharing it with anybody in church, which that can't be good spiritually.
I never realized that, Mike. That's really a good point, that PKs have a hard time feeling safe at church, which is supposed to be the safest place in the world.
Yeah.
You maybe can't feel safe in public school. You can't feel safe, in the
felt more safe in public school, though.
I'm saying, it's like...
Because you can say pretty much anything except Jesus.
Right. Well, they don't care, if your pastor's kid or not there, right? But it's like, that's what I'm saying. The one place you're supposed to feel safe. Like, a lot of kids don't feel safe in the public school. A lot of kids don't feel safe in that back alley. A lot of kids don't feel safe in sports. But the one place that you should feel safe is the church. But the pastor's kid has this, living in a glass house thing, like everybody's watching me, and I can't be myself. Because if I be my real self, then they're going to judge me, and they're going to judge my parents, and they're going to tell their mom and dad, and then they're going to leave the church.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. I never realized that.
Yeah. And that goes into, so there was that. Those were like these underlying kind of spiritual wrestlings of a early teen. And then I went from small Christian school. So my dad's church had a private Christian school, but it only went up to 6th grade. Mm-hmm. And then, so the church started going through a split at around that time, and I ended up going to a public school, and it was a pretty horrible experience in a lot of ways. And it's funny because I talked to a lot of friends who were lifelong public schoolers, and they couldn't believe what happened at my public.
No!
Yeah, they're like, dude, I went to inner city LA public schools, and it wasn't as bad as what you said. Yeah, a lot of. Honestly, I probably can't even say the stuff, but it was pretty bad. Like I had a practicing witch,
mini Babylon.
Yeah, practicing witch as a teacher.
Crazy.
People having sex on the bus on the way to school. Like just NWA playing over the PA during lunch, and just all, and then that's like the light. That's the light stuff.
Right.
So I think, and then I felt. And I hated being there. So I think it was like a combination of like all that started to make me kind of a little bit angry at God. And I felt like, well, I can't fit in the church. And God seems to have kind of like forsaken me. So where can I fit in? And it's like, well, if you want to fit in the world, it's very easy. Sin. And you'll find a group that coalesces around that.
Right.
Whatever it is.
Right.
I mean, obviously there's sports and stuff like that, which is, can be good, but at the same time, even there.
Did you play in high school?
I played football in junior high and high school, and it's a regret I have. I wish I would have stuck with it, but partying.
What position you play?
Wide receiver and cornerback.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I liked cornerback, but I like tackling.
Yeah, DB. That's a hard position.
Yeah.
And what high school?
Well, I played Pop Warner in junior high, and then Rankin Valley Christian School.
Wow.
High school.
Did you have size back then?
No. Not at all.
That's always the downside, man.
No, I had, it was weird. It was kind of my whole physique changed. My legs were like twice as big as my upper body. I had huge legs, very, very quick, not super fast, but very quick, super agile, and just kind of good instincts. So definitely didn't have that, I wasn't going to play college or anything like that, even if I stuck with it.
Was the team pretty good?
No, they're pretty bad.
So learn to lose a little bit?
Yes, definitely learned to lose. But, the thing is, I really got into just partying.
Got it.
And I remember after my freshman year, when summer practice hit, we're going to do the Hell Week and double days and all that. It was like the summer of just, I don't even know, just craziness. Like I had friends with their parents left them their huge house for the entire summer, unsupervised, and it was just party night after night after night. And
so it's like 15, 16 years old or so?
Yeah. And
no supervision.
bro.
Drink, hang out with girls, goof off, all the crazy.
All that. And, thankfully, again, because these were a lot of Christian school kids.
Oh, okay.
So even though we were doing bad things, it wasn't as bad as like what, you know what I mean? Like we all had, like, we're not doing.
Yeah. At least we're not doing that.
Drugs that can kill you now. Like that's off limits.
Right.
Like other things, that could inadvertently get you killed,
Sure.
We were fine with doing.
Yeah.
But, so, I mean, honestly, like I am thankful that even my group of centers, we had standards.
The Holy Spirit was there.
Yes. The common grace of God was there.
Yeah.
But it definitely because you can see like sin not only separates you from God, but, just even what you do to your body, right? Like you actually degrade your own body. Like, because I think to play sports, you have to take care of your body. You want to be optimal,
right?
And with that enticement, and obviously it was more than just the feeling good of drinking or whatever. Although especially when it's new, and you don't have all the consequences that come later. And honestly, this was a thing I was talking about with an old friend of mine from high school when we met up not too long ago, like in those early days of getting drunk, like we were happy drunks, happy.
Right.
No, and then it's like 10, 20 years later, everyone is like miserable,
right?
Like miserable and angry and just and you're like, man, it's like Satan gets you in the beginning. It's all fun and games,
right?
And you wake up the next morning, you feel fine. Nothing bad happened. And, and you think it'll always be that way. And it's like, man, it gets it's get the hooks in you. And then eventually it's even that, what is it? C.S. Lewis said, sin is an ever increasing appetite for an ever diminishing pleasure. It's like you want it more and more and more, but what it first gave you, it gives you less and less and less of. So you're less and less fulfilled, but you want it more and more. It was just a weird. So I think in retrospect, like with sports, because I'm so into sports now, just like watching it and, and my kids, trying to get them into it and stuff. I do, as a Christian, I see so much value in it. I see why the Apostle Paul drew from it, so many times in reference to the Christian life. And obviously, God made us bodies as well as souls. It's actually a part of who we are, so much so that even when we die, one day we will be resurrected in bodies. Right. It's actually literally a part of who you are. So, I think even the way sin robbed of just my physical health, where I went from being in the best shape of my life, amazing, I mean, we were running around in 100+ degree heat, 8 hours a day, full football gear on, guys vomiting there. But I mean, man, what great shape, we were in, and gave that all up to like just party all day, drink, hang out with girls, laugh, have fun, go to concerts, just, and that it was supposed to just be that summer. Oh, and then I'll come back and I'll play on the team again, like the next year. Never happened, bro.
Wow.
Never happened. Just became a lifestyle, and definitely the health started falling apart fairly quickly, especially after high school. Really bad.
So that kind of pulled you out of the church or completely away from the Lord. Were you living, was it a double lifestyle? Was it like a go to church on the weekend because my parents do, or no, you're just like, I'm out?
No. So, I mean, as long as I lived in my parents' house, it was, this was their conviction. I know some Christian parents do it different. I feel like they did it right, I think.
Yeah.
They didn't ask me to pretend I was a Christian or anything, but you're going to church. That's just what you're doing.
Right.
And I made it be known I did not want to go to church. My brother took a different route.
Yeah.
He would pretend he was doing the Christian thing.
Yeah.
I was just like, this sucks.
Right.
I don't want to go. This is stupid.
Do you have a question, Mike? No, this sucks.
Yeah, this is lame. Why do we get the lame religion?
Yeah.
Where you can't do anything fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I let it be known. So it was never, I didn't have to live a double life in that sense. But I was, like I would literally go to church. Second it was done, I would just not want to talk to anybody, see anybody. And again, it wasn't just because I was pursuing evil. There was a part that was actually a desire to do something good, namely to protect my parents from because even when I was trying to be good, it wasn't good enough. So at some point I'm like, well, what am I doing this for? If it's ultimately not for God, and then you people in the church are just going to nitpick me to death anyway.
Right.
Why not have the fun too?
Totally.
That way, I'll give you something to complain about.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to go do it anyways. Yeah. So you graduate high school and you step out into the world. Are you working? Are you pursuing school?
Yeah. So I went to community college straight away, Santa Rosa Junior College. had a girlfriend at the time that lasted almost 5 years.
Oh, wow.
Got serious, got close to getting married, but ultimately I moved 500 miles away.
Wow.
And yeah, that went downhill very fast. The junior, I mean, we were like drinking malt liquor in the parking lot before a class and going to class, and it was just a huge party.
Wow.
Just doing our thing, and then the whole college professor thing. Like I had my psychology professor brought in a transvestite man, and this was like back in, gosh, what year was that? 95, 96.
Wow.
Had a transvestite come in. It looked like Mrs. Doubtfire too. So it was like an older transvestite. Totally looked like Mrs. Doubtfire. and the thing, and I remember this because again, I'm not walking with Jesus in the slightest,
right.
but to me it was it was weird.
Sure.
But I'll never forget the man who was dressed as Mrs. Doubtfire. I actually felt pity for because he looked very confused. The wife of the guy was the one standing up and because I think there was some snickering in the class, and she was railing, "You don't know how hard it is for him to be a woman trapped in a man's body." Like she was actually the more dogmatic one, which was kind of strange.
Like she's pumping this thing up.
Yeah. I don't even know what that was all about, but that stood out to me. And my professor was a psychologist at San Quentin prison, and Charles Manson was one of his.
Oh wow!
One of his patients at one time.
Wow!
Yeah,
unreal.
Yeah. So that just turned into a big party. Failed almost all my classes. We were high all day, bro. Years of my life, like Cheech and Chong, just up in smoke.
It's a trip.
Oh, it all just blurred together.
Well, it's a trip reflecting because now you're like professor on the other side.
There's a logic to it.
Right.
Yeah, I was literally just trying to kill my brain.
Wow.
It was like I didn't want to think because God, like I think even C.S. Lewis would kind of say this, like God haunts your thoughts. And the Spirit of God and biblical truth, it kind of haunts the mind and wants to creep into the corridors of your mind. And especially if you're raised in the church, it's just very hard to get away from that. So I didn't want to think. I remember that consciously. I don't want to think about things. Right. So whatever I got to do to not think, that's what I'm going to do. So the natural progression to like wanting to learn and all that, which was partly practical need actually, but on the other end, it turned out, oh, wow. Instead of like destroying my brain, I like using it, So praise the Lord.
Right.
But I think it was just wanting to not think, and numb the conscience, and so I ended up failing all my classes, dropped out, and I was just working and living life, and there was nothing I wanted to do, I mean, just work, earn money, and enjoy life.
Right.
That was it. Kind of a hedonist, I guess.
Yeah. And so you're just kind of going through with life. You're in this relationship for 5 years. And I don't know, was there any, when you think back on this journey, like before this conversion moment or before this moment where the lights turn on and you realize you need to come to Jesus, were there any like major gospel deposits or like interactions that you had like through your childhood where you had a moment with Jesus or you felt the Spirit of God show up or someone took time with you? I don't know, is that through your dad? Is that through your family? Is that through friend, somebody in the church? Do you remember any, or was it just a giant blur where you just, it's like, I didn't have anything until Christ showed up? Yeah,
well, I definitely think in the back of the mind and in the heart, there was the stuff from my childhood, you know? I mean, I don't think that ever fully goes away. I think at best you can keep it down. You can suppress it. So I think it was always there. But practically on a day-to-day, I mean, I think I was able to do a pretty good job of not regarding God in my thoughts. It wasn't there for a very long. I would have feelings of guilt for certain things, but that would go away usually pretty quickly, and I would make little half-hearted attempts to maybe stop doing a certain thing or, but it was never like a fundamental heart change. It wasn't about God. It wasn't about, the Lord or anything. And honestly, just, I think being young, you're just not responsible for a lot, right? Sure. Like, so your sin, you can believe the idea that sin is yours, right? Like that's a popular idea. Oh, it doesn't matter what you do as long as it's private. Well, in a sense, no sin's private, because you're a social creature and you have relationships. So whatever you do, that changes who you are, and then whoever you are is going to impact other people, period, whether you know it or not. So, I think I generally just didn't, I didn't have responsibility for other people, not having a wife, not having kids. That's why I feel like, the Lord, not that I would say, hey, get married and have kids before you come to Christ, but how many people do I know had kids out of wedlock or whatever? They weren't Christian, and it was actually having kids that brought them to, right? Because you finally have to,
totally,
you see the effects of your sin. It's not like hypothetical. It's like, no, it really does. It's real. Like when God says this is not good, it's because it's not good. He's not like making stuff up. It's how the world works. So I think, seeing that, I mean, I do think having a fairly steady relationship, if I can call that, if there was unsteadiness, it was on my end for almost 5 years. Like that did give me some responsibility, and I think it definitely did keep me from probably doing more bad things that I would have done, and definitely, it's something I look back on with regret. I wish I would have been a Christian man, and that been more, and like. And her family, honestly wonderful. Sure. Wonderful, sweet family. And, that's definitely one of those things, you look back on with regret. Fortunately, I was able to, after I got saved, like kind of just try to make amends. And, Paul, which I tried to do to as many people as I could, know, but.
So what was the moment of the lights turning on then for you? Is it, the story kind of comes up to right around the time your dad is obviously very sick here, right? You're kind of doing school / working / partying / in this relationship. Like where do the lights turn on, or where does grace show up in your life?
So the late 90s, so again, the relationship I was in, we talked about getting married, almost went that route. And honestly, it wasn't even that, I think this was the Holy Spirit, though I didn't see it that way at the time. There was a desire, almost a knowledge that I needed to just leave. And
you felt like you needed to get out of the relationship because it wasn't God honoring or something, or you felt something was off?
Not even just that, like leave the area. Like I got to get completely out of here, kind of a thing. I need a complete change of environment. Like that was important to do. And I had looked at different places, but again, my motive wasn't right. It wasn't like to go do anything good. It was just, maybe I just needed, but a Christian friend from high school that I hadn't talked to in years calls me up. And he says, hey, man, I know this is kind of out of the blue. I haven't talked to you in a couple of years, but I go to Azusa Pacific University, and my roommate just decided to get married, and he's moving out. I don't know why, but you came to mind. Would you be interested in being our roommate? And I was just like, I was working for Bank of America and, had a girlfriend and, been with her almost 5 years. And I was like, oh, hey, good to talk to you, bro. Yeah, that is random. I don't know. Maybe let me think about it and I'll get back to you. Right. I hang up the phone. As soon as I hang up the phone, I know that I'm going. Like, I just knew. Like, I was waiting.
Were you in the Bay Area still?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was waiting. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't know it, but I really was waiting for, like, a lifeline. Like, something to get me. And it was just the whole thing. You know what I mean? Like, and not, I wouldn't blame anybody but me for being where I was. But I just kind of knew I couldn't make any kind of change if I stayed in the area.
Right.
Whatever. So, I think it was within 6 months I found out through Bank of America I could transfer down to Glendora to the bank there, and had a place to live. Southern California.
Yeah, this is from Bay Area to Southern California. It's a big move.
Oh, and I'll remember the day because I moved in January and it was 81 degrees and I was laying out getting tan by the pool. Yeah, and that
wasting no time.
I'm like, what have I been missing?
Yeah.
so I took him up on it. I moved 500 miles away from everyone. And then, we broke off the relationship and that, was able to separate because I just think I would have kept going back if I were there. And at first things were kind of like going in a good direction. I think, I being in a new place and kind of a new start, part of me wanted to go to church again.
Sure.
A little bit.
Yep.
And probably deep down there was still some blame for, my sins on, my environment or other people or particular people. And being in a new environment was about to expose it. Bro, it's not everybody else's fault. It's you.
Right.
And did well for a few months, and then I just started meeting lots of girls.
Right. At Azusa.
Yeah, bro.
There's lots of girls at Azusa.
Well, everybody would come party.
Sure.
From APU over at they were called the Crestview Apartments, which was right across the street. And I was going to Citrus College and then working at the bank and the meeting. So it just kind of went crazy, bro.
Got it.
Like for a while. And I just thought that was fun and cool and whatever. And getting out of a relationship too, that was like a way of getting over that. But things started going downhill very quickly. And I ended up in situations I never thought I could be in, around people that were involved with stuff like I was not comfortable doing. And even where I was in a small town, it wasn't there, you know? So I ended up like one of my last nights in the world, I was riding shotgun in my friend's Porsche, and he was a Mexican mafia guy.
Wow.
And we were partying all night in Pasadena and places like this and going to places it shouldn't have been. And I remember some guy in a Suburban cuts us off, and he swerves around angry, reaches in front of me to the glove box, slams it down. There's a gun there. He pulls out the gun and points on the Suburban, freaks out. They run a red light. And they take off. And I just remember thinking to myself, I've seen this movie and I'm the one that gets shot, Right. So like, and then that night almost got arrested, me and my friend, for disorderly conduct. We were just back at our apartment complex up late, like breaking stuff, banging on doors, and this guy, this older guy in the apartment complex, he wasn't a Christian. Actually, he was an ex-Christian. Interesting side story.
Wow.
He comes over. The cops are there. They're pulling up. You can hear the lights and stuff. He grabs me and my buddy, takes us to an apartment, takes the key out, opens it. He said, "You boys get in there and you stay in there." And he threw us in and he shut the door.
Wow.
We didn't get arrested, all that. Next morning, I wake up. I'm so sick and hungover and everything. I can't move. I knew if I vomited, it was going to be all over myself. Like I just couldn't move. Just the cold sweats, everything. I felt so sick, felt so miserable, so horrible. And then it wasn't audible, strictly speaking, but it may as well have been because I heard it. But it was, interior in my heart. And it was the words, "I'm taking my hand off of you." And I knew exactly who it was and what it meant. It was God. And he was telling me, "I let you push me and push me and push me like a rebellious son to his father. What are you going to do, Dad? What are you going to do, Dad? What are you going to do?" And I knew that I had pushed it far enough. Like I thought I was a big, tough guy and I'm going to do this and that. And I knew that if I took another step, I would reap the whirlwind, because so much of what I had done, I did not reap what I sowed,
right?
At least outwardly, right? But I was going to reap with interest,
right?
And I remember this too, because there were other times where I had a bad night or whatever, and I'm like, "Oh God, if you get me out of this jam," you're hugging the toilet,
right.
Porcelain God. "Oh God, if you get me out of this jam, I'll never drink schnapps again,"
right?
And but I would always revert, But I remember this time I said, "If you will take my miserable, wretched life and make it your own, I will follow you till I die." And that was then, I think that's when I was born again. Like,
praise God.
Yeah, and
incredible.
And I stopped partying, stopped being with girls. Just
So it's instant heart change that you woke up a different person the next day.
Yeah.
It's kind of scary because it's the King James version of this, but Samson, and he wist not that the Spirit of God had left him.
Yeah.
Or he knew not that God had left him. But it's that moment where it's like, I'm taking my hand off of you, or like, I'm going to let you, I'm not protecting anymore. Like, if you want to do this, that's up to you, but this is it. This is your last straw. And this brings forth a moment of surrender. And that old man, that's it was the hand of grace, right? Throwing you in that door and saying, you boys stay here. Yeah. What a trip, man.
Of an ex-Christian who was involved in the Jesus People movement, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, very fascinating story.
Unreal.
Yeah, just bizarre, honestly.
So that happened. You surrender. You pray this secret prayer in your heart.
Yeah.
And then God rips out the heart of stone and gives you a heart of flesh. Yep. He raises you from death to life. Yep. The scales fall off the eyes. You can all of a sudden see spiritually.
Oh yeah. I remember just being overwhelmed with joy and gratitude. That God would take me back after all that. You know what I mean? And here's the thing too. Like, it wasn't going to hell that scared me. I had a pretty good idea I was going to hell earlier, years. I honestly, like, once in a while when we'd be sitting around drinking, I actually remember I said this once. I scared the heck out of everybody. I turned to my buddy and said, we're going to hell, right? And they're like, dude, like, way to harsh the vibe, bro. I'm like, it's true.
You can't say that.
We're going to hell.
Yeah, the song's playing.
Drink up.
We're on the highway to hell. Like, you guys, this is real.
Yeah. So ironically, it wasn't that. When the Lord said, I'm taking my hand, it was again, I'm going to die. I'm going to go to prison. I'm going to, so, you know what I mean? And because that's the funny thing. Like, you would think hell would be the worst possible thing. And I think obviously if you were there, it would be. But in life, it's these other things, right? Whether it's somebody losing their marriage, losing their kid, losing their job, losing their losing their health, whatever. But for me, I knew, man, it was a lot of pain and loss you couldn't come back from. The days of childish ignorance were over.
Right.
And it was a command to repent.
So how did this start? This journey to Bible college, and this pulling your heart, towards the ministry. What exactly happened?
Yeah. So I mean, I just I remember immediately just insatiable desire to read God's word. Just would literally open my eyes and I wouldn't even get out of bed. Just reach over and grab it.
Where'd you get the Bible?
I think I had it.
You had it?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. I don't remember having to buy it, or I think it was probably a Bible my dad got me.
Wow.
Probably had my name in it and everything.
Yes, that's awesome.
But yeah, I remember just literally I was scared to get out of bed without reading it because I didn't trust myself.
Is this from repetition when you were young, or things that you saw your dad did and you saw your family do? You're just like, you knew that you were to go to the Word of God.
Well, I was going to other things immediately. Yeah. So I knew, what do you do?
Yeah.
You can't do nothing.
Right.
So it had to be, it's either something good and of God or it's not.
Yeah.
Right. And you're going to something. So yeah. And again, I think, I can give myself time now to have my coffee and stuff and just really enjoy my time in the Word. But like then it was just so desperate. And again, I think the sin nature so strong still, even being truly converted. But the old man's still there.
Yeah.
There's still a pull towards things that are very fresh in your mind.
Right.
So yeah, I was just like, man, I needed to go there. And I remember the words leaping off the page.
Wow.
Instead of dead letters on a page, it was literally just jumping off.
Speaking directly to you.
3D, just coming off.
It's amazing how that happened.
Oh, yeah. And that's the thing. Like,
if you've never experienced that.
As a Christian parent or even a pastor, and I think it's good for you and I to remember this, I can't make that happen. Right? Like, nobody made, like, that was something God did, and he has to do it in their heart. So I think even like when we're praying over sermon preparation and preaching the sermon, Lord, if you don't prepare their hearts, I actually remember what it's like to hear the word without the Spirit of God testifying and converting the heart. It just falls to the ground. It's not, you know what I mean? And we can take it on like parents. Christian parents can take it on them. Oh, I failed. I haven't done this. Pastor, must have not have been a good sermon.
Right.
Man, God uses that
up to God
for sure, but that's sort of the secondary thing. The primary is the Spirit of God convicting a sinner's heart. Without that, forget it. You can argue all day, you can be winsome, persuasive, and still won't make any difference. So, I feel bad in retrospect that I had to kind of cut off friendships, because some of those guys, some of the people I hung out with, honestly, they were likable people, it was more about my weakness. I just couldn't be in those environments. It was too fresh, too soon. And obviously some I still wouldn't even be in today. But if some people were to do some things around me, I am not tempted in the least bit. I'm like, no thanks. Right. Like I'm so happy, like sober and in Jesus and being able to put two brain cells together. It's like I'm super stoked. So yeah,
it's still works.
It's amazing. So, but I remember any relationship that was going to get in my way, it was gone. And I remember at first I had zero Christian friends. So like come home from work, I would shut the door and read my Bible, and that's all I would do, And then I finally, and I started going to churches, and I got plugged in at Raul Reese's church in Diamond Bar.
Yeah.
And I started going every possible time I could.
Wow.
I even joined their Kung Fu studio.
Nice.
For fellowship. Started doing that, take care of the body a little bit, do something. And I started inviting friends that I knew to come with me to church. And I even invited the guy who pulled the gun to come to church. And it was crazy. He was teaching in Judges, and he literally stopped in the middle of the service. And he made a random comment that I thought, okay, this could go wrong. And he said something about there's somebody here, there's cheating on their wife, they're doing this, they've got a bag of cocaine in their shoe. And the guy next to me turns and he's freaking out. He's like, you told him. I'm like, bro, I knew the thing about your wife. Are you telling me you got a bag of coke in your shoe? And he's like, yeah, that's where I always keep it. And he like literally, and then we're all like, and then he's like, okay. And then he got back into teaching Judges.
Unreal.
It was insane.
Wow.
So I literally was just bringing people to church left and right, whoever I could, even went forward with some friends in altar calls and things like that. Yeah. And then where I got started in serving was there vacuuming carpets for 8 hours on Saturday, vacuumed the whole place.
Wow.
Yeah. And I begged to do it.
Wow.
It's a good reminder for pastors when we feel bad about asking people to help. Like when the Spirit of God is on your heart, I actually had to I think my dad had to call Raul to allow me to vacuum.
Wow.
Because they're like, well, how long have you been coming? And I don't think it was like 6 months. I'm like, I got to serve now. I got to serve the Lord, bro. Like I got to be all in. Or I'm not in at all. That's how I felt. Like I'm that kind of person. I'm all in or I'm not in at all.
Yes.
And they're like, okay, we'll make an exception. I'm like, thank you for letting me vacuum your carpets for free all day on Saturday.
Wow.
So I started doing that.
Connected.
Yeah. So that was when I, but at the same time, I was longing for a different living situation as well. Plus just that insatiable appetite for the word.
Yeah.
And my brother had gone to Bible college. He had just finished or he was about to finish.
It's in Marietta.
Yeah, this is in Marietta, and the kind of the cool thing with my brother is, we had gone a similar route, little bit different in details and stuff, but he kind of came out of his thing about 2 years prior, and he started going to the Bible college. And the funny thing was, I visited him at one point. And when I first drove in, this is when I wasn't walking with the Lord and all that, I pulled in and I literally was like, dude, my brother joined a cult. There were like little worship leader guys everywhere on the lawn and women like surrounding them, like swaying as they played. No. And I'm just like, and then the guys stopped me. The security stopped me because my shirt, I think I had a tank top on.
Yeah.
And they're like, your arms are exposed, bro. I'm like, dude, my arms are always exposed, bro. Like, what's wrong with, like, are you a weirdo?
Yeah.
Like honestly, like
it was carry.
It was creepy. And I remember, I was totally creeped out. So my first impression was not good.
Yeah.
But I knew my brother's life had changed. And I know initially I kind of wrote it off like, oh, dude, I get it. I feel guilty sometimes too, and I try to make amends. but I always go back.
Right.
And I'm kind of like, you'll go back.
Right.
But sure enough, semester after semester, he would come back and he was just full of the Spirit, full of the Lord, loving the Word. And then so I knew about this place and I saw how it changed his life. And the cool thing about that whole Bible college situation with, I mean, big camp, I can't remember, it was 43 acres or something. It was pretty big.
Yeah.
And it was its own community.
Hot springs.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And I think it was so important. It wasn't just the Word. I was getting that at church and I was reading my Bible incessantly.
Right.
But living in a Christian community like that was huge, bro. Like, I can't even underestimate, because we put a lot of emphasis, it was the Bible we're teaching, right? Well, certainly it was, but I would say specifically, uniquely, it was the community, because I was getting the Bible teaching elsewhere. But what you're not getting at a lot of churches, probably most, is that kind of community where you literally live in it.
Day and night sharpening.
Whoever you're studying the Bible with, you literally are sharing a bathroom with.
Right.
Like, that's a different ball game. And I remember so much spiritual, what you could call spiritual formation, discipleship, like, happened there. And I think it even changes your vision for what the church is and ought to be a little bit. You know, it may not be able to be quite like that, but it ought to have an element of that community.
So your brother was going there or just graduated?
Yeah, he was at the end. So we didn't know. I think he finished and then I went.
I see.
Yeah. So I started getting a desire to go and I applied. And so sure enough, I think I can't remember if I was walking with the Lord, maybe less than a year or maybe about a year. And that's when I went to, I needed to make a move still, you know, because I was still in my living environment and I was doing, you know, fine walk with the Lord, but I really longed for that. I wanted to be around Christian community.
So you applied and got in, and then you were there for 2 years.
Yes, I did 2 years from 2000. I did 2 years like in prison. 2000. I did a stint. From 2001 to 2003.
Got it. And then, for Mike's he's explaining what happens in there. It's this intense, Christian, I don't know, I don't want to call it Christian boot camp, but it's like this intense, hyper Christian environment where from the moment you get up in the morning till the moment you go to sleep, you are entrenched in Christianity, praying with people, worshiping, going to classes, having conversations, serving on campus. So you're entrenched in this Christian environment for 2 years. And so it is like throwing fertilizer on a plant. Like, I mean, you just grow so fast. You either love it or hate it. I mean, you can't hang around there long. And because Katie was there for a semester and she talks about this heightened growth that took place.
Did she live on campus?
She did, yeah. She lived on campus.
That's the full experience.
And she served, and she talks about how she had to make ranch dressing. She had to do it in the, giant amounts of it.
Oh, yeah.
Which she hates it to this day because of that.
You saw how much mayonnaise went into that.
Yeah. But she just, she loved the time of journaling. She loved the time of talking with people in the classes and the time of reflection and prayer and real genuine relationship with Jesus, really, really growing deeply in her walk there, even in the short time that she was there. So, powerful time. So you're there for 2 years.
Yes.
Any professors that stuck out to you that just really impacted you?
I hate to say no. I really do. For me, like I said, it was my roommates and the Christian and the friends I made.
Those are the guys who impacted you the most.
Again, I had good professors, don't get me wrong, but nothing anybody said was revolutionary or anything. And I think it was being surrounded by Christians. I think a couple of things, because I had a love-hate experience with it. I did feel like quitting a lot.
Right.
Because I went from an environment where, after being saved, I'm the good person.
Right.
Right? Because and then I moved there, and then I'm around a bunch of, I was around, I think I'm 22, 23 at that point, and I was around a lot of, and some of them were 18, 19. I had a dorm steward that was 17. And a lot of them, their sin was, I listened to a secular song once, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I am filthy.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I actually wrestled with a lot of guilt and shame for the past. And that was kind of just maybe my own, the devil, spiritual warfare. Some people also were just super Pharisaical,
Sure.
like that. There was a real legalism that actually became an issue.
Right.
So like you said, hyper spiritual, but that actually can be good and bad.
Sure.
Like there's some very weird, strange stuff that can happen, but it was still lessons learned of how things in a Christian community can get weird and can go wrong.
Right.
But I think, just experiencing that, and I would honestly say, in terms of like being a pastor and a teacher, somebody who is eventually going to be called to teach, so much theology was worked out through arguments I had with roommates who were also serious about the word after class.
Huh.
So wrestling with, are you, is it, is faith of yourself? Does God give you faith? Calvinism, Arminianism, like predestinated free will, blah, 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 all that stuff. Like we would literally debate that. We would go through our Bibles.
Right.
It was the wrestling room.
Right.
Like we were, sparring, getting in the ring and kind of going. And sometimes we get a little, little rough, little heated, little ego gets involved. But at the same time, it was good sparring. Like, because you realize a lot of people will read the Bible, but then they go away and they have a private interpretation and it hasn't been tested against, other interpretations or it's not subject or accountable. And so that removed that. Like we didn't have luxury of, my whatever I think this text means, it's going to be taken for granted. No, we would literally argue everything out. Right. And so I think a lot of theology was done in conversation.
That's awesome.
Not just the classroom.
Yeah.
And like I said, I had some definitely good professors. And again, just being in the Word, right? Like we're just in it all the time. It's like 20-something units of Bible, is coming out of your ear. And then Chuck tapes. We had to do 6 or 7 a week. I can't miss one of those.
Chuck tracks,
and then do notes on those, so we would do all that. So that was there, but I think, like I said, I think being in the living environment, getting out of, obviously you can sin wherever you are, but obviously like the baser sins, just easy access, like I was removed from that environment. So that was just helpful for me. And then being in that environment where I really had, I had great roommates, honestly, like just from the first semester on, and we had challenges. There was like 8 guys to a room, so that's a little rough.
Right.
Some guys had it worse. It was like 12.
Yikes.
Like 12 in a smaller place. We always had pretty good situation. But yeah, honestly, fantastic roommates, really challenging. A number of them are pastors.
Wow.
To this day. Actually met Garrett there.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Didn't you like pull Garrett into Bible college or something?
So he was already, I met him my last semester at the Marietta campus. So that would have been I think my third semester was his first.
Yeah.
And if I recall, he was looking at maybe being done, which, by the way, that's exactly I was going for 1 semester. That was it. I wasn't like going for a degree or anything. Like, didn't cross my mind.
Yeah. I'm
going there for a semester just to draw near the Lord.
Sure.
And it was semester by semester, however it happened, the Lord provided financially. Like, somebody from my home church paid for my second. I wasn't going to go.
Awesome.
My dad's like, oh, really? Oh, well, what do I tell this anonymous donor who just paid for your entire semester?
Wow.
I'm like, oh, okay. Maybe the Lord's, because I was praying, like, Lord, if you want me to, but I don't think it's time to go get a job, get back to work, be a Christian. But so, yeah, I think we met. It was my third, his first. And then I was really feeling stirred up, like to do my final semester somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And originally I was going to go to York, England. I've always had an affinity, a passion for British history and culture. Yep. And so I wanted to go to the York campus.
Okay.
But what actually happened is I met the director of the extension campuses, who is Ben Viscara, who became a friend of mine. And I was talking to him because he's the guy I would go through to apply to York.
Right.
And he's like, hey, I have an idea. Why don't you go early, the summer before the fall, and you could intern at a Calvary Chapel, Cardiff in Wales. Huh. And my heart like jumped like, yes. I can, in a sense, you can read the books, study anywhere, right?
Right.
I want to go minister. Like, I want to go serve. Yes. So, ironically, I didn't end up doing my semester in York. I interned at Calvary Chapel, Cardiff, Wales, between semesters. with Pastor John Vickery, and his family.
Yes.
And it was honestly wonderful.
Wow.
Seriously, wonderful family. I was in York for 2 weeks. York was incredible city. The Bible College, the church there, Calvary Chapel York, Dave and Nancy Sylvester, just doing such amazing work there. Loved being there. Good experience to get out of American culture.
Yeah.
Because it was definitely an awakening. Because just my thoughts as a less traveled American, like, oh, they speak English, it'll be the same.
Right.
No, like very, very different in many, many ways.
Wow.
And it challenged me a lot to become self-aware of culture.
Right.
I think I never really was self-aware of
your own mission,
of
really.
American culture.
Yeah.
Just, pros, cons, uniqueness of it. And so, getting to serve with a small church there. And I would also say, that was probably because the Calvaries I had grown up in were all very big churches.
Sure.
So for me, if you're successful and healthy, numerically, you're at least 1,000, if not more.
Right.
That's. So I go to this Calvary church in the UK, and it's 50 people,
right,
something like that.
Yeah.
Definitely not the model of success.
Yeah.
But then what Americans don't realize is churches generally will not see the numeric success in the UK that they will here. It's different.
Totally.
The environment, the cultural ground, the spiritual ground, it is different. And so number one, your expectations have to be different. And then second, I actually came to see it as probably one of the most healthy experiences, because even though it was small, it functioned like a family. Like everybody helped everybody. Everybody helped set up. Everybody helped tear down. Everybody we did ministry in the neighborhood to kids whose parents just would let them roam the streets and smoke and drink and sleep around. So we would do ministry and outreach to them. We would, and just hanging out, like, oh, hey, do you guys want to go to the movies? We would all go to the movies together, go bowling. Like it was a family. And I was like, wow.
Amazing.
Which was very different from my experience growing up with the church in its heyday. It was, it was many good things, but it wasn't a family. Didn't have that vibe, right? Like I told you, a family should be a safe place.
Sure.
It's, you be who you are.
Totally.
And honestly, enjoy life and be a normal human.
Right.
And not just a minister, but just a human being, and honestly, it was probably formative. It made me change kind of my model of what success was in the church. So not against numeric growth. I think that's good, but if numeric growth means deterioration of qualitative relational health, that's not success, in my opinion. And so, like, I literally think to this day that was probably one of the sweetest church experiences. And I remember Pastor John even apologizing. He was, I know we're not as big as the Calvaries in America. I know we're not. I'm like, stop apologizing. Like, I feel like I should apologize, because to be honest, even though there's a lot of activity, many times there's a lot of dysfunction. Mm-hmm. And I think what you have here is precious, and maybe you don't even know it because you think it needs to get here. And I'm like, no, let me tell you, from someone who's come from there, what you guys have here is actually pretty special. So I think that was a very formative time. But anyway, so I come back, so I know I'm not going to the UK for a semester, and then they started a South Maui campus, and I had wanted to live in two places since I was a kid, the UK and Hawaii.
Wow.
Two dreams. I had opportunities to do them as a pagan.
Yeah.
But neither made sense to me because I knew what I would do there. I was like, I can waste my life here. I don't need to spend extra money. But then the Lord fulfilled those seed dreams in my heart as a kid, lived in the UK, and then now I knew I was being called to South Maui, and that's when I was like, Garrett, dude, they got this place.
You recruited him to South Maui.
Yeah, let's study the Word and serve the Lord and do it.
So you guys hang out there and get to do ministry together and goof off and do and struggle together and all the rest.
Everything.
Yeah.
It was honestly, it was a great.
So fun.
Oh man, it really was a great time. I mean, what was cool about that is there was a sense of community, but it was different because they had various individual apartments reserved within just a regular little apartment complex. So there's non-Christian and some funny stuff going on. Like there was this guy we nicknamed Nudist Tom. He always had his front door open and had a sign that said clothing optional. Like, we would just walk by and you could see that sign.
Tom, please.
Yeah, Tom. Not today, Tom. Not today. But, so it was kind of cool. Like we felt, I mean, again, because I think as cool as the Murrieta campus was, it was kind of like a monastery, right? You're secluded from, quote, the world, even though obviously sin is still there, devil's still there. But that can also breed some unhealthy things. And so it was cool to have a community, but then we were in the world, right? Like in the world, but not of it.
Right.
And so, having our own apartments and getting our own budget to go buy food. And
wow.
That was better, even though I can't believe we survived on the money that we had. Like really.
Yeah.
It was amazing. Yeah. We were starving.
Crackers and cheese cans.
Bro, yeah. We would take a weekly trip to Costco and we would have to pull our money together to just get enough to eat, enough to live. I got a job at Gold's Gym,
nice,
on the island, and we would set up for church. I mean, it was church in a box, so we'd have to go to the U-Haul place, pick up all the stuff. Bring it down there to the beach. Service was on the beach.
Wow.
On the beach.
Fun.
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, and honestly, obviously very distracting.
Sure.
Everybody in their swimsuits walking by while they're, and then this one Sunday was so funny. I think it was Pastor Rick. So his back is to the ocean, right?
Okay.
We're right there. Uh-huh. And this one Sunday he's preaching and all of a sudden what he's seeing is everyone leans to the right.
Right.
Just everyone leans.
Sure.
And he just kind of keeps going.
Right.
Thinking maybe we'll come back to center.
Yeah.
We don't.
Yeah.
Everyone. So finally he kind of turns around and there's like 100 humpback whales jumping up out, reaching out of the water, just landing and just doing it. Oh, I mean, it's just this
amazing.
Yeah, it was incredible. And he goes, oh, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And there's like, now anyway, I think what John's saying here.
Right.
And he gets, so it was cool, but at the same time, not super practical.
Only in Maui.
Yeah, only in Maui problems, bro.
Yeah.
But it was cool. I mean, like Garrett and I mean, just friendships. Garrett and Brent Yim, who went to be with the Lord, just two very close friends and brothers. And it was cool because we all love the Word, but we also love to like work out and exercise and hit the gym and we were playing like full on tackle football with these island guys. Nice. Like it got pretty pretty competitive, pretty gnarly, almost got in fist fights and stuff. But it was cool. Like they respected us because we're Christians, but like, dude, we're not.
Right. We're here to play.
We're not here to lay down for anybody. You know, I mean, in the Lord, I'm going to try to hurt you a little bit, and so like afterwards, there was like respect, and a number of those guys I would see at the gym, when I worked there and stuff, and there was real temptation. The gym was next door to the only nightclub in South Maui, and have girls coming over and like, hey, do you want to come drink with us and all that? And of course, part of me wants to say yes.
Sure.
But I decided to follow Jesus. No turning back to the nightclub. Yeah. So, just like, and it was good that the temptation was there, right? Yeah. Like, I mean, that means I'm alive, I'm a man.
Yes.
and actually having to make a decision is where strength comes, right? If you have no temptation, you're not being stronger.
Right.
So, but it was so necessary. Like Garrett and Brett, we could talk about those things. Zero condemnation.
Awesome.
But at the same time, not letting each other, you know what I mean? Like, dude, in love, nobody else is going to know, but I'm going to kick your butt if you get into anything bad.
Right.
And I'll do the same for you. That's what we're, like we're spiritual workout buddies.
Yes.
Like, hey, we're going to get you in there, want you to be strong. And if you look like you're going to fail, we're going to do something about it.
Yes.
So it was just, and then just, the particular island spirituality was a real trip to me because it wasn't adverse to hearing the gospel, but it was syncretistic. So it was kind of like, oh, Jesus, bro. Yeah, sure. I'll go to church. Oh, we're going to go do drugs and go to the nude beach after.
Right.
Like people had no problem hearing it and even thinking, oh, you have good vibes, bro. Good energy, bro.
Right.
But then it would just all kind of fold into this weird,
totally,
I don't even, it reminded me a little bit of the way Hinduism functions, where you've got these many gods, and then if a new god comes in or Christianity tries to come in, it just absorbs it into its pantheon, as opposed to like, oh no, get that religion away from me. They're like, no, come in, bro. We got plenty of room.
Right.
So it was kind of frustrating. And I almost was like, I wish you would be like just a secular person that would be like, oh, that religion is useless. It's a crutch. It's this, that, and the other. It's the opiate for the mass. I'm almost like, part of me even though you think you don't like that kind of just immediate stonewall pushback, in a way I actually learned to appreciate, because that's how people in the UK were.
Got it.
That I shared with. They were just like, you believe that?
Right.
My grandmother believed that. It's a fairy tale. You didn't know that. Right. You know, just like I liked we've been there, done that. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
You know, that was kind of, because we used to do street evangelism there and stuff. But there in Hawaii, it was different, right? So you see the power of culture when you're trying to preach the word in a certain environment, and even the way Paul would preach differently to Jews or to pagan philosopher Gentiles, right? You know, just it is the core is going to be the same, but the delivery mechanism is going to be different. The language he uses, the starting, you know, what he assumes you know and don't know. So it was kind of a cool challenge, spiritually speaking as well. Just great friendships that were formed there, and just wonderful, wonderful people.
So you're in Maui
to meet.
You're in Maui for how long?
So I did my fourth and final semester. My dad died at the end of that semester.
Wow. Were you home already, or were you?
No. So I had about a week left of school, and I got the call from my brother. I can't remember if it was a call or a text, but it was, Mike, it's time to come home. Huh. Like, it was the call that we had been waiting. Because, you know, he'd gone in and out of the hospital for a while. Yeah. And I'd heard he could die multiple times, to the point where you're almost like, yeah, sure. Yeah. You know? I mean, we can all die, you know. But no, he was going to die. He was in the hospital, you know, with the tube and everything. And so I got a plane ticket, left the next day, and the Bible college expedited my diploma so I could show my dad on his deathbed that I went to the place where, literally, when I was 18, he tried to get me to go to the Bible college, showed me a pamphlet, and I told him, I'll go there when hell freezes over.
It's crazy, man.
That's what I told him.
Wow.
So I got to bring my diploma to the hospital bed and say, well, that looks like hell may have froze over. And he couldn't talk, but he tears in his eyes, and he nodded his head. Yeah. But I mean, just the timing of God, the providence of God, the goodness of God. A lot of people don't get to say their goodbyes. Yeah. You know, I mean, it stinks that he died when he did, but, you know, some people's loved ones die much earlier than that, some later, some get to say goodbye, some don't. Yeah. Just get the call, they're gone, you know. And, you know, I just kind of look at it, and again, in the mystery and providence of God, for me, that was what was meant to be. Yes. You know, and clearly you could see the divine orchestration behind all of that.
Did this put a fire in you and your brother for, like, ministry? Like, all of a sudden you were like, what happened to you when you, because you're at the end of your Bible college, and you'd been processing a lot of ministry, you'd been doing a lot of ministry, and then it's like, you know, it's weird to talk about death. It's weird to preach. It's not weird, but it's interesting to talk about death and eternity in heaven, and even call people from death to life, to repentance. And you've been doing this in Wales, you've been doing this in Hawaii, but now you know someone who has crossed through that door and is on the other side. You know someone closely who is experiencing Jesus on the other side. Yeah. And it's weird when that happens, especially to a minister or someone called to be a minister. It's like, I don't know, you know, people process it differently, but it becomes unbelievably real. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's not a hypothetical anymore, because it's someone that you know that is now standing on the other side, looking back on, you know, all that's happened. They've lived their life. They've finished the race. They know their kids are still down there. You know that he's on the other. There's all of these things, these thoughts. Like, you know, when my brother passed, I would reflect a lot on what he was doing or what he was up to, you know, and I wanted to know the details which the scriptures don't allude to, you know. What does it smell like up there, you know? What do the leaves look like, you know? What is what is in front of you? What are you experiencing? You know, what can you see down here? What can you hear? You know, what does God allow you to experience? Are you sitting in the throne room of God forever, you know, waiting, you know, this moment where the earth is brought close to heaven, you know, like processing all of that. It's like I like the idea of a loved one almost going on vacation to heaven. You know, like we know it's somewhere. We know it's there with God. But you know, a real tangible person that you used to touch and look into their eyes and experience them, and now they are on the other side. It's the trippiest thing ever. Yeah. It's a surreal moment for you when you realize, like, oh my gosh, he's not here anymore. He's there, and I know him. You know, so you know, I'm interested to hear. You know, what did that do to you? You know, like you're finishing Bible college, you're about to step into ministry. What did that do to you guys? You know, did it turn on anything? Did it take you into, where did it take you?
Yeah, I mean, probably not. Honestly, I don't think it made a difference in terms of ministry, but as a person, it affected every area of my life, you know. I mean, because obviously I've reflected on it for 20 years, hasn't gone away, because he died before I got married, never met my wife, never met my kids. There's many things I would have liked to have asked him. I would have liked to have had the benefit of saying, hey, Dad, how do you be a good husband? Right. Hey, Dad, how do you be a good father? Hey, Dad, how do you pastor a church well? Like, I didn't have the I got a little bit of the, you know, some ministry questions that I was able to just start having, but you know, that's not even the big, I think, I've thought about this a lot, and obviously I've seen a lot of people who've, I think it also depends how close someone was to you, obviously, like, because people experience loss differently. Yeah. But I think there is a uniqueness about losing a parent. Yeah. Because if you think about it, what's more real than anything in the world is your parents. Yeah. These are actually the pillars of reality. Everything else is like an idea. It's abstract. But when a child comes into the world, what do you know? Right. You know, you know by touch, you know by feel, you know by smell, right? It's those things, you know. And like even the Hebrew word yada, the word hand, yad, comes from yada, to know. And it's the idea of to know by touch. It's the most basic form of knowing. And so you build your understanding of reality, at least in part, relationally, right? Like what is most real? Because you can talk about, when you're older, you can abstract and you can talk about philosophical ideas. Sure. But everything starts with what is touchable, what is most real to you. And the pillars of reality are your family. Yeah. They literally, like, my dad was this solid oak of a man. He was a hero, and he was kind of a cornerstone. Like, and even my mom, like, I love my mom, but emotionally she was more like unstable. Sure. My dad just was this picture of a rock. Just, you know, kind, but immovable in a way, just very strong. And so I think, you know, you grow up with that your whole life, even though hypothetically, especially as you get older, you know, of course they could die, and they will one day. Sure. But when it's gone, like it just like it's almost like the mind alone, not even just the how does the soul, you know, the spirit respond to this, just the mind, it kind of recoils because a basis for all knowing has been removed. And so, like Jenga, if everything was built on this, everything that is real is this relationship, and then whoosh, it's gone. All of a sudden, it's like you kind of feel like everything's falling apart. And then, you know, how do you rebuild? What goes in there? So, I think, you know, like in a positive sense, as much as I would like to have had my dad back all these years, I do think I had to lean on the Lord more than had he been around, right? Because I didn't have another father figure to go to, so just started leaning on the Lord more directly for that, you know. And I don't think that replaces having visible, tangible expressions of a father or, you know, shepherd or something like that in your life. But obviously, in a way, there is a positive side of that. Is just, you know, really relying on the Lord. And and I look at, like, grieving, just, you know, I think it's coping with the reality of God does allow horrible things to happen. Sure. And I think, you know, a lot of Christians and especially in the charismatic Pentecostal community, because we believe in miracles, and we might even believe in miracles are common. Right. You know, we just pray for it, because we had so many people praying for healing and prophesying, you know, that he was going to be healed. Wow. You know, and then you get the lame one. Well, my prophecy was fulfilled. He's fully healed now. He's dead. You know, and you're like, right. Yeah, I know what you're saying, but you were wrong. Right. Just admit it. Just go ahead.
God said no to that prayer.
Yeah, sorry. You were just wrong. Yeah. You lied. You're a false prophet. I will stone you with my hand.
And I have a stone.
Yeah, I
have a rock in my hand now.
I have a nasty left hook. Yeah, so I think, like that's been a profound, being with someone when they're dying, man, like that.
Yeah.
There's nothing in the world that can prepare you for that, and I mean, it was painful. It was agony, super hurtful. Yeah. I mean, like I said, still to this day, stuff comes up. I wish he could have met my wife.
Yeah.
Day I got married, it was a wonderful, beautiful day, and yet there was a sense of emptiness.
Right.
That he wasn't there to see it.
Right.
Then I had my first kid.
Right.
He wasn't there to see it.
Right.
I love my kid. Nothing wrong with it.
Right.
So it's just there's always. Yeah. But it's sort of like Jacob wrestling with the angel. You're gonna there's things in life you're gonna walk with a limp the rest of this way to heaven.
Right.
And it is what it is,
yes.
and I don't think, it might be like a weakness in one regard or a pain or something. You go to put pressure on that thing in your life and it kind of gives. It could be an emotion or a feeling or a thought. But at the same time, I feel again I literally do lean on the sovereignty of God.
Yes.
And somehow, some way, even though I don't fully make sense of it, it was His time to go.
Yes.
There's a lot of woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Yep.
And it's weird now because even with certain technologies and things, maybe they could have given him more time or whatever,
Sure.
So, but it's weird. But he wasn't born in 20 years later.
Right.
So it is what it is. But I think probably one thing I've had to wrestle with, like negatively, is just a little bit of pessimism.
Sure.
Because so many people were like, oh, God will heal him, God will do that, and if you just believe enough,
sure.
and I don't know where we get the idea that, miracles are simply par for the course, that it's just every day, all day, like you expect nothing to go wrong. I think we can err on kind of an extreme, pseudo spirituality where we're expecting miracles all the time.
Right.
And actually, I think miracles by their very nature are exceptions to the rule.
Right.
Like normally when you get pancreatic cancer, you're going to die.
Right.
Soon.
And it's probably because, the Bible is smashed into pinnacle events.
Period.
Yeah. So what you see in the text is miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle after a supernatural moment. But if you should put the years of time and all of the events that happen in between, that miracle to that miracle, or the amount of time, and you would see that these are not only taking place with a ton of time in between them, but it's also taking place in a certain area and a group of people at a certain time period, and it's one moment that shows up. And I like to say that instead of these, I think we confuse it in our teaching. When you speak of gifting, having the gift of healing, people like to call that. I think that is, I think it's a gift of healing that comes once in a while, or a manifestation of the Spirit, but it's not a gifting that we see, people try to say, I can pray for someone to be healed, or almost like we can summon God at any time to show up and start healing. And if that's true, please go into the hospitals and make this happen now. Yeah. Right. I'll never forget a story where it was my buddy's cousin in high school. He was in some type of Pentecostal church, and the youth pastor had prayed for healing over him. He was sick. And so he said, if you believe by faith, stop taking your medicine. So he said, I believe. He stops taking his medicine. He's in the hospital dying. And they're like, people are saying, please take your medicine. No, I believe by faith, He ends up dying. And it messed up, some of my buddies and their family and their pictures of faith and what it means to believe God at His word. And, can God say no to our prayers? Yes. Absolutely. He says no all the time.
Every time they're wrong.
Yeah.
Which is frequent.
Can He say yes to our prayers? Yes. Because He says no, should we stop asking? No, we should keep asking. And we can keep praying for healing, and we can keep asking God to move, but we don't need to expect Him to say yes to everything. Father knows best, and He does know the day that we're born, and He does know the day we'll step into eternity, and He is the author and finisher of our faith. That's up to Him. I can't decide those things, and I too step back and choose to rest in his plan, choose to rest in his work. He knew he wasn't surprised at the death of a loved one. He was not surprised. He knew long before I ever did, and for some reason he says, this is when I want them into eternity. This is when I want them home. And so I try to rest in that as well and reflect on it and say, Lord, what are you teaching? What were you showing me? What were you doing in real time? And these are the great questions we get to ask God when we get to heaven, fill in all the blanks, let us see like what everything that you were up to. So this is a monumental moment, obviously, in life. From Bible college, you see your dad step into heaven, and you're on your way into ministry. Is that right?
So after I graduated, I was asked to come back to Maui, get ordained as a pastor in the church, and begin teaching at the Bible college.
Oh, wow.
So my first class was a 3-hour Gospel of John class.
Nice.
Straight out the gate.
Wow. And you taught the whole book of John?
Whole book of John, 3 hours.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy.
That's fun.
Yeah, it was fun. It was definitely intimidating. Yeah, I mean, it was a great opportunity, to get to do that. Just did that and then that's the semester. Garrett and I were roommates at that point. So that's how you got a lifelong friend, if you can actually be roommates and not hate each other afterwards. Yeah. That's pretty huge.
Yeah.
So just got to be I think when he and I became just very, very close friends. Great opportunity, but I also was kind of going nuts.
Yeah.
In South Mountain, honestly, it's one of those places, by the way, one of the most transient places I've lived. Yeah.
Wow.
A lot of people would sell everything they owned to move to Mount, because, the postcard back in the day, postcards, the pictures, if I could just get there.
Right.
If I could just get there.
Right.
And then they get there and they realize, it's not a great place for business. It's not a good place for jobs. The very thing you love about the tourist experience actually stinks for business. Like the whole shaka, lay back, don't okay, that's great if you came here to do nothing.
Right.
But what if you actually want to do something?
Right.
Now it's a problem.
Right.
So a lot of people would just, not even be there a year, maybe be there a year. So the congregation was constantly.
Got it. How long were you there for?
So a year total.
Okay.
So I stayed there, and then I got, through a friend I had met on another mission trip to the UK. So I'd been going back to the UK for 2 weeks at a time. And through a friend I had met there, I got in touch with Michael Smith, who was at that time the high school pastor at Calvary Costa Mesa.
Was he really?
Yes.
Mike Smith, was he real? I didn't know he was a high school pastor.
That was his gig.
Shout out, man. Michael Smith.
Yeah, that was his gig, man. He did an amazing job, and you definitely learned a lot from it. So I stayed in touch with him because he and I had met over there.
The pastor in shape model of all pastors.
Yes. Yeah. And he really, because he got saved through the Navigators ministry.
Did he really?
And they were, in Florida, and they were huge on discipleship. So that was one thing in Calvary I didn't see as much.
Huh.
We were known for Bible teaching, but actually discipleship, hanging out one-on-one, working with people, I didn't see much of that, or at least intentionally.
Got it.
It might have happened sort of accidentally, but never here's kind of the way he ran the high school ministry. It was always about getting small groups of guys together, going through life, real talk.
Right.
Whatever you're going through, we can talk about it. We're going to love you. We're going to help you. And then just, activities hey, we're going to have fun. We're going to hang out. We're going to do this. We're going to, have a Viking gladiator night. We're going to eat meat with our bare hands, and we're going to play football, just like you would do. And me, I was a little bit more we need to do more Bible studies.
Sure.
This is how we're doing it. But so through a mutual friend I had met over there in the UK, I had kind of stayed in touch with Mike. I wasn't close to him or anything at the time, but we kind of hit it off. And then they said, "Hey, we'd love you to come on staff at Costa Mesa as an assistant pastor. What do you think of that?" And I'm like, "Yeah."
Wow.
So I moved back from Hawaii to Northern California to help my mom for a summer, this is right after my dad died, so kind of get situated and stuff. So we're there for a few months. And then I moved down to Southern California, moved to Fullerton.
Yep.
And with the expectation, I got this job offer there. And then Chuck changed his mind about just wanting to hire at that time.
Got it.
Just budget reasons, don't want to hire anybody. I'm like
a freeze.
Yeah, and I'm okay, but I moved down here,
Chuck.
and I had a month's worth of money.
Yeah.
to pay for my, so
of course.
So, I got hired as a personal trainer at Valley Total Fitness and City of Industry.
Okay.
Puente Hills.
Nice.
Started working there, and then I started just going to community college just because I felt like, I kind of just had this inkling in my mind, I maybe need to do that. So I just enrolled, did it part-time, didn't really, I'll aim for an AA. How's that?
Sure.
So I do that. And then I just started volunteering with the high school group.
Okay. So
that's when I got to be friends with Michael and see how he did ministry too. And then again, the discipleship component was very pronounced. So that's something I picked up, I gleaned, because I always had obviously the Bible, verse by verse, Bible teaching, got that from Calvary. Anywhere I went, they pretty much did that. The one thing I didn't see often was that intentional discipleship.
Yes.
He did that. So I gleaned that.
Got it.
Glean that from it, and just being real and authentic too.
Yes.
I think about things, obviously in the model thing and stuff.
And
hearing his stories and I mean, very self-deprecating. Like he would totally make fun of himself.
Totally.
Like Zoolander jokes.
Yeah. He's the original Zoolander.
Totally, man.
Before Zoolander.
Blue Steel. Magnum.
He had
They're
Magnum.
the same look. People.
Yeah. They stole it from him. Yeah.
So I do that for a while. I can't remember how long that was. It wasn't a year even, I don't believe. But then Michael comes to me and says, "Hey, so something opened up, but it's not what we were talking about." I'm like, "Okay, what's this?" He said, "So the assistant pastor thing is still not open. However, the high school needs a sophomore Bible teacher. So you would actually be a classroom teacher teaching sophomores 6 times every day. You would have curriculum. You'd be going to the teacher planning meetings, turning in lesson plans, all that." And I'm like, okay, like it definitely was not, you know what I mean? Like I didn't, school, education, academic was not my thing, never planned on it. And I liked pastoral ministry. You get to teach, but it's also more well-rounded. You're doing a lot of other stuff. But at the same time, I've been praying literally every day for the Lord to open a door. And I didn't want to do the personal training thing. I didn't like it for various reasons. It just wasn't working out. I didn't like it. And the Lord opened this door. And so I'm like, okay, I've been praying for an open door. This isn't exactly the one I thought, but I believe it is the Lord.
Right.
So I said yes. And so I ended up teaching there 3 years, but one of the most important things about this is at the new teacher orientation, I saw this drop dead gorgeous, beautiful woman. Yeah. And immediately I'm like, okay, A, don't look at her. Don't. And B, she's probably taken. Right. You can't be that attractive and not be taken.
Yeah.
Turns out later she ends up being my wife.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was always one thing I was like, after obviously coming to the Lord, just like, man, if there's something that could derail me, it'd be that, right?
Yes.
Like women, like go for the wrong. And definitely being a single Christian man, having the minimum standard, like you have to be like legit Christian. Don't, can't just be a sticker somewhere. Right. You got to be legit.
Yes.
And that was definitely like, as time went on, it was hard not to compromise, right? And be like, oh, well, we're kind of saved.
Right. So you met your wife there at Calvary.
Yeah, she was a first year on campus substitute teacher for the elementary.
Okay.
Yeah, and turns out, she wasn't married, but she did have 2 little girls.
Yes.
So that was interesting because I never pictured myself marrying a single parent.
Yeah.
Just like, I wasn't opposed to it per se. It just literally never entered my mind.
Yep.
Although nowadays I think that's very common, right?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the way it's going to be for half the population, probably, or maybe more. So anyway, just 3. So obviously there's that side story going, which is huge.
So you guys got married?
So that alone, we met and just, I mean, it was pretty, we were ready, what I mean? Like pretty fast, pretty quick. Within 9 months, got engaged. By a year, we were married.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you're 3 years in and you're married now?
Yeah. I was married after about a year.
After about a year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we met my first year.
But you taught for 3 years?
Taught for 3 years. Yep. So, and here's an interest. So this is where the whole like earning the degree thing, like, again, that wasn't me. It wasn't my personality. I was trying to destroy my brain for many years.
Right.
And in Calvary, you don't have to go to seminary to become a pastor, right? It's not a thing. If you're a Presbyterian, you literally have to.
Right.
No choice. However, in the schools, because of accreditation, if I wanted to get a raise, which now with a instant family, I needed a raise to simply afford to eat rice. If you get a degree, you get more money.
Right.
You get paid more. That's how it works.
Totally.
So church doesn't work that way.
Right.
School does because of accreditation.
Right.
So I was already, kind of halfway through an AA. So I'm like, okay, I'll do that. So I went simply to provide for my family. That was it. But it turns out when I'm there, my mind just jumps with delight at using my brain and applying myself and being in the academic environment and learning from people and being around, because obviously at community colleges, non-believers mostly and non-believing, but I loved being challenged by them, and I loved getting to challenge my own faith. Hey, I believe what I believe, but can I answer what I believe in such a way that it answers your beliefs and your objections? And I found that you know what I mean? It was like sports, that kind of competition in a healthy way where you're getting better as a result, whether you win or lose.
Absolutely.
And then so that went from bare necessity to passion.
Wow.
And so I more or less have been in school till this day.
Yeah.
Just so did that.
Hey, Mike, side tangent on that, you've kind of been on both sides, and you grew up in as a PK under your dad and in his church. And then now you are a pastor, you're a church planner, and you, just from that full circle, full arc kind of perspective, from growing up in Calvary and in scenarios in which a lot of pastors aren't trained, but then also being trained yourself and kind of having a full understanding of that, I'd love to hear your perspective on that, because it's kind of like, seminary is cemetery, to a lot, and you go there to die,
where faith goes to die.
And again, it's
not always wrong.
Yeah. It's not obviously not for everybody, and a lot of the giants in the faith are not trained, and John Bunyan, for instance, this guy. Pilgrim's Progress, he's a shoemaker,
Charles Spurgeon,
so there's these giants, who grew up in a library just reading, and the education comes in different ways, the training comes in different ways. And, anyways, you're, in the Calvary world, you're probably deeper into this thing than most pastors. I think I can say that, and you have a great perspective because you're very tightly intertwined into all of this, and you understand a lot of different perspectives. You have a lot of friends, and you've been around this world for a long time. And maybe some perspective on seminary pros and cons and things that you've loved. What do you think it's helpful? What do you think about pastors being trained or not being trained? I'd love to hear all of it. Any and all.
Yeah, that's a lot, so probably should kind of lay down this. But just to throw out, so...
I'm trying to paint a broad, and then you pick what,
So correct me if I'm wrong, Raul Reese and Mike McIntosh actually both went back and got degrees in seminary. And then I know Dave Rolfe had actually gone to Talbot, I think way back in the day, but recently finished his Doctor of Ministry at Talbot as well. So we got... There's guys that are doing it, but again, I think it was kind of not... I think
Did Chuck have a degree prior, in medical? Is that what it was? Or he?
So I'm definitely not an expert in that. I don't think so. He definitely was looking at going that direction.
Yeah.
And he did go to Life Bible College.
Right.
So he had Bible college.
Interesting.
But I think, and the funny thing, interesting, is how we're kind of quiet about the guys who did go back. And it's interesting because they were already, quote, successful in the Calvary movement. A lot of people have been saved under their ministry, discipled, and yet for some reason they felt led to, it'd be fun to talk to them.
Yeah.
Because I'd be very curious to do that.
Yeah.
To hear what they say. So there's that. It's definitely not new on my part. But like you said, it is probably more abnormal than normal for Calvary guys to do it. But again, for me, so it started with just bare necessity. It wasn't like, oh, I need this because I'm not getting enough here, there, whatever, right? However, I definitely think it, by and large, has been good for me personally, not entirely.
Right.
And I would even say there's just pros and cons, and I could say pros and cons with respect to two different things. Number one, not every seminary is equal, right?
Sure.
So you can have a totally different experience. I mean, some are, for example, just very evangelical, orthodox, solid, maybe they're even Pentecostal, charismatic, so they'll be very similar to Calvary. So there's that. So not every school is the same, so you have to talk about it that way. Then secondly, but even if it's like a liberal school or a conservative, there's just certain things about academics and learning that actually they all have in common.
Yeah.
There's just certain things. So like on a negative side of it, because I have experienced negative things, as far as the whole thing, there's the whole knowledge puffs up, but love edifies, right?
Sure.
And that's true even if you go to a local church.
Sure.
And that's all, right? That can always happen anywhere. But it's so concentrated, the knowledge part.
Sure.
And this kind of happens in Bible college. I kind of got that way a little bit, even coming out of Calvary Bible College. Just a little bit of, not horrible, but a little bit.
Yeah,
bit prideful. I know a little bit more now.
Right.
So it's just so concentrated. And then because like the Bible college is still more popular level, it's based on the English translation of the Bible, and you're not really diving too deeply into commentaries and church history and stuff like that. So it's still fairly popular level, so you don't feel like there's a separation between you and everybody in your congregation.
Totally.
But seminary, you are diving into things that other people don't know or don't have access to.
Right.
And I think that does cater to pride.
Yeah.
Look what I know.
Got it.
I'm an enlightened one.
Yeah.
The Gnostics, we have secret hidden knowledge.
Sure.
So I think there's just that particular temptation to academic pride. And I think, by the way, that's not just for like seminaries. I think knowledge in general, like academics, PhDs, medical, some of the medical community, just, we're PhDs. So everything we say about this, virus or this vaccine, we won't get into that one. Right? But you know what I'm saying, right?
Totally.
I think some people, they can get so puffed up with pride that, you know what I'm saying, it skews their view of things. So I think it's a potential problem. But at the same time, I think the answer is not to be ignorant or unknowledgeable. It's simply to walk humbly before the Lord your God, keep the end objective in mind.
Yes.
Let whatever knowledge of the truth you learn humble you instead of, you know what I mean? Like to me, so it should be, I think if you think of it not just as like, I'm just learning, I'm just getting a degree, I'm just going to know stuff, get a job. I think if you think about it as like a spiritually formative process for good or bad,
right?
And it's very careful. I walk humbly, through this, and then I think it can be good. I can actually think it can be very good.
Do you recommend that pastors be trained?
I think so. Let me say pros about how Calvary has done things. I think one thing we've done well is identified gifted people. Mm-hmm. That's like our main thing. I don't know, and again, in my experience of the Calvaries I've been involved in, I don't know, I haven't seen a lot of intentional, explicit processes of equipping and discipleship and assessment along the way to determine readiness.
Sure.
It's a little bit more of a sink swim model. We identify gifted people,
right,
and then we throw them in.
Right.
And again, there's pros and cons to that. The pro is, again, does God gift people for ministry? Yes. Mm-hmm. Do we want gifted people doing what they're gifted to do? Yes. Yep. And I think we do well with that, because you might think that's a given, but the truth is I see in some of the denominations where, say, a degree is required, it's almost like if you get equipped, we just assume you're gifted and we'll put you in.
Right.
So I saw this in seminary, guys that I personally, subjectively, did not feel were gifted as pastors. They weren't called.
Totally.
Getting equipped to be qualified to be pastors. Then because they did the equipping and the qualification, they were assumed to be gifted, and then they floundered. They were simply not gifted.
Yep.
So I think gifting and equipping are not the same thing.
Sure.
And in some of the traditional denominations, they've erred on the side of, if you're equipped, you're gifted. But I think we've done the opposite in the charismatic world. If you're gifted, you're equipped.
Yeah.
Not necessarily.
Right.
And I think the problem without having a formal, strategic, explicit, a process with built-in regular assessment.
Sure.
Somebody could literally, quote, sit under your teaching. We use that phrase.
Right.
but who's examined you to see what you heard and what you understood?
Interesting.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Totally.
Like I'm sure you've had this happen. You've said something, but somebody thought you said something you didn't say.
Sure. But
if that never came up, you would never know.
Right.
And they could go on believing something incorrect or wrong, and then they teach it from a pulpit because so I think, again, it's just like nobody does it perfect.
Sure.
And to me, I think there's wisdom in having awareness of how other it's not about bashing where we're coming from or saying, oh, we got to leave this game. No,
sure.
It's simply, like let's glean from those who've gone before us, eat the meat, leave the bone, don't throw stones. So I'd say, that's more or less kind of my view of it, that I think we've done well and shouldn't stop. Like identifying gifted people. I do think the sink or swim model, it does weed out.
Sure. Very quickly. Yeah.
When you drown, you're dead.
Sorry.
You're pretty dead. But unfortunately, when a pastor drowns, they can drown a congregation.
Sure.
So I think, And again, I also think maybe there's a third category in both of these groups, the gifting group, gifting first, equipping first, character.
Yeah.
Because you could be both gifted and equipped in terms of skill,
right?
Gifted charismatically, whatever. Personality is a part of that, I think. But then your character, right? Like, what if you are gifted by the Holy Spirit and you're equipped,
right?
But you have poor character,
right?
And I think sometimes we're tempted to go ahead and just ram this person through into leadership. And I see this all the time, like when famous people convert. Rather than give them 5 seconds to grow up in the Lord, we throw them behind a camera and bring them up on a stage and, oh, but look what they can do for the King. You know what? I care about their soul.
Right.
I trust in God enough to say, look, he doesn't need, whoever, this movie star, this rock star, who's, by the way, like super messed up.
Right.
And they need to be protected
and
helped. What does the Bible say? Don't lay hands on early. You don't want them to be overwhelmed with pride. You need to nurture these.
That's right.
Just because they have cultural currency and they're famous and they might be wealthy and you think, from a utilitarian perspective, if we put them out, more people will come to the event, more people get saved. Therefore, we've done God's work. If you're ruining these people, you got to care about the minister.
Yeah.
And I remember one professor, I think it was at Vanguard, said that. I think they said that, and again, provocative way of putting it, God cares more about the minister than the ministry.
Huh. Wow.
Isn't that kind of a jarring statement? Because I think the reason it was jarring is I actually kind of assumed the opposite.
Right.
It's the ministry that matters, not the minister. And it's like, well, God can start a ministry however the heck he wants.
Right.
But the minister is important because God cares about who you are, not just what you do.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
And I think if we think God's dependent on our work, there is an underlying heresy.
Right.
God's dependent on our works.
Right.
As though he needed anything, Paul would say, right? What exactly does the God who made everything need from you? What does he get for Christmas? Nothing except what he's already made.
Right.
Like you offer him jack squat. It's amazing he lets you do anything.
Yes.
So again, I think gifting, equipping, character, somehow every church needs to find a way to do all three. And I think just for us being self-aware of our culture, not just Calvary Chapel, but I think more broadly, charismatic Pentecost. I think they have issues. Yeah. You see this with Hillsong and other groups too. Like they're good at identifying. Are these people not gifted?
Oh, they're gifted.
Heck yeah, they're
gifted.
Super gifted, right? Equipped,
right?
Marginally, unfortunately, character, bro. I even think the equipping's probably pretty poor. Other than like, here's how to draw a crowd.
Totally.
I don't want to bash them.
Yeah, no, I get it.
But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like again, so the whole hyper kind of charismatic charisma gifting thing, like that goes wrong a lot.
Yes.
Bro. So again, and it doesn't mean don't acknowledge it. It is a part of what God's doing in His leading. But if it's God, and the timing is God's. Then equipping in this. So to go back to your question, I don't think like Calvary pastors or future need to go to seminary. I don't think so. But I do think churches in-house should be intentional and strategic about developing an equipping plan that tests them. Because that's one thing great about seminary.
It's really good.
They would literally examine my papers.
Yep.
If I had a an idea, theological idea, I would voice it out loud, and quickly other students or we could wrestle and spar.
Yeah.
So where's the sparring rooms? I would rather you make a mistake in a classroom than in a pulpit.
It's good. Yeah.
So if you've never had a classroom where you can voice out those weird theological ideas that you have, because they all have them, and the pulpit is not a place for your opinion. It's a place for God's truth.
Right.
So I think if you have unexamined opinions, and they're so unexamined, you don't even know their opinion, you think they're doctrines.
Right.
And then you preach them in the pulpit, you are doing tremendous damage. So I think I got as soon as I got hired as a pastor, I was shocked, actually. I felt a ton of bricks on my shoulders. I'm like, oh my gosh, I wanted to be in ministry for all that I could do for the kingdom, and it suddenly hit me how much damage I could do. Right? Like that's a fact. If you can do a lot of good, you can do a lot of bad.
Totally.
And it scares me when people who genuinely are zealous for good works and to make they don't acknowledge you can do a ton of damage. The more people you influence, the more people you can ruin.
Yeah.
And I feel like there should be fear and trembling. And if you just walk easily into that, hey, 1 million fans on Instagram, let me tell you my latest weird opinion.
Right.
You're like, bro, you better sit back and check yourself. If you're going to speak for God, if you're going to speak in a, quote, authoritative way, it better not be just your opinion.
Yes.
And that's where I think, again, however you do it, and I think you can. I think Bible College kind of did it, but we just didn't require that in Calvary. You didn't have to go do that.
Sure.
I do think some churches would start maybe their own Bible College campus. Like I think Art in your interview that was talking about Golden Springs had their own. So I think that's a way of doing it. But I also think assessment needs to take place where there's some relationship, accountability, and checking in, because obviously if someone's not gifted, I don't want them spending $40,000 in seminary. You're never going to see that money again. Believe me. Right. Trust me, ain't nobody getting a seminary degree for the money.
That's gone.
You're going into debt. Yeah. And you're going to you regret it probably. Yeah. But you know what I'm saying? I don't want you wasting your time and your money if you're not gifted and called to do this thing. So, I think, hitting all those three is, and then just whatever, maybe we're doing something great, good. Keep doing what you're doing great at doing. But the other things, let's fix that. Yeah, no, this is amazing synopsis, because again, once we identify someone gifted, we see the authority or power that God has given in the pulpit with influence of people or leadership, whatever it may be in the church. You see that. He's gifted. Wow, this is great. But then to take that gifted person and again, to train them, it's like someone who has amazing athletic ability, and you can see it right up front. And it's like now you put them with a coach, and that coach can train them and teach them the process. They reach levels they would have never have reached. And we're not saying that God can't do that in a person who is gifted. Obviously, he can. But I think oftentimes we forget that with Jesus and the boys, the 12 or the 11, that he discipled, they got to go to the seminary of Jesus. Yeah. They lived with him. I mean, they literally were asking him questions day and night. They knew how Jesus chewed his food, bro. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? You can't just say, I read the Bible for 3 years. That's the same thing the disciples. No, it's not. Not even close. No. They were his roommate. Yeah. For 3 years. They knew how fast he walked. They knew what he liked to eat. They knew how he chewed. They're sparring with Jesus. They literally observed his rhythms, kind of going back to an earlier thing. Yeah. They literally watched Jesus walk away from golden opportunities most charismatics would dive headfirst into. What? We got thousands of people showing up. I'm there. I'll cancel my son's birthday. Right. I'm going. Jesus is like, I'm going to be in the wilderness. See you later. Right. My phone will be off. Yes. No, but not the phone I call you on, right? No, it's going to be off. Right. I think, again, I don't, equating 3 years of reading the Bible or even going to seminary for that matter is not. Can you imagine even hanging out with the Lord for 4 months? You get to do a semester with him. You get to just dialogue with him day and night, just hanging around. You get to spar with him, like you keep saying, this
this sharpening, where you just get to ask him, and the infinite wisdom of Almighty God, like pouring directly into you. And not only is he speaking the word, but he is speaking in your language, like that you and me personally, Josh, the way that I like to hear things and understand. Like he knows my culture, he knows my background, he understands me, speaks directly into me. The depth of growth is immeasurable of what took place within the disciples. The seminary of Christ, or whatever you want to call that discipleship process was infinitely better than any schooling we'll ever get on this planet. And so, Paul was trained with Gamaliel, right? And he's a Pharisee of Pharisees, and he knows the law so well. And then he is trained at a very high level. Then the lights turn on, and then he's able to turn it all and use it for Jesus. And so, when I reflect on a craftsman of any type, there's nothing like a person doing it themselves for a while and trying to figure it out on their own. And then when you stand next to a master craftsman and he says, let me show you a couple tricks. And he starts to show you how this thing works. And you're like, oh my gosh, this old man knows what he's doing. Like, he actually knows. He is light years ahead of me in my craft. And you get to sit down next to and actually grow. And I think that it's important. There must be some type of training involved, and it can come, like you said, from a lot of different angles. But man, it is important that we do not throw, a 16-year-old into a tank and let him drive this thing around town. Because yes, too often these guys are running the church into the ground. I even saw it so I spent 2 years at MacArthur's with my master's. And, I saw guys get, what I call the machine gun, and even though they weren't gifted, they were put into a church and then they just mow the place down. And I remember MacArthur even in chapels saying these types of things like, just because you're trained does not mean that you're a pastor, and does not mean that you have authority in that place. Like, he was like, you go in there and you serve those people, you wash those people's feet. You were the lowest of the low in that place, and you were to love them in that way, and then you'll be able to teach them and shepherd them and pour into them. And even though he comes off the pulpit so strong and heavy, that's a whole nother discussion of why I think that happens. And for those listening, I disagree with a lot of things, even when I was in there and was trying to process. But for me, gifting was identified in me at Harvest. And I went through a pastor and training program for a year in there. And then they let me fail on the pulpit and work things out. And a lot of that dialogue and conversations with the pastors in there and trying to shape me and mold me into a good preacher and someone who taught the Word of God and exposited it correctly. And then I got to spend time with John Corson in Mexico for 4 months, where he was teaching us basically to pray and to know Jesus and to walk with him closely. So when I came to LA and the opportunities, a professor tapped me on the shoulder that you planted a church in Studio City. Do you want to be trained? I'm like, what's trained? He's like, did you ever want to go to seminary or go check out one of the classes? I'm like, I don't know, sure, let's try it. And so they said, I'll enroll you next week. And so they literally snuck me in the back door of the seminary, and I'm sitting there, Calvary Chapel guy sitting there at MacArthur School at Grace. And I think I just told this story as of recent, but it's a fun one. The first preaching class I took, Austin probably kill me if he ends up hearing this over and over, but because I say it often, but Austin Duncan is my professor. And it's the preaching class, and I remember one of the first things they had us do was preach the gospel in 60 seconds. And so I was like, all right, this is right up my alley. This is I love this, So anyways, he knew I was a Calvary Chapel guy, so he taps on me to go and and came from Greg Laurie's church. So he's like, you go do that. So I do it, And then at the end of it, he's like, you left off something. If you had 10 more seconds, what would you do? I was like, I'd call everybody to repentance, of course, and call them to call on Jesus as Lord and Savior. He's like, that's good. At the end of the class, he was talking to me and he said, I'm a Calvary Chapel guy. I'm like, what? And this is, I mean, Austin is like preaching for John MacArthur, like at this moment, like he's the young guy that preaches for him all the time when he's not in the pulpit. And he's like, yeah, I sat under Skip Heitzig and grew up under him and learned to exposit the word there, but I wanted to come in and be trained, and like grow there. And so I was really shocked by that and encouraged by that. And I was also encouraged by what you pointed out earlier, Mike, is that in these classrooms, you're able to think through and work through a lot of stuff that in some circles or in some places, you're kind of not allowed to say anything.
Yeah.
And it's like if you start talking about the gifts of the Spirit, which I am not a cessationist, I'm a continuationist, but you're not even allowed to question that stuff. Reformed theology, you're not even allowed to start talking or discussing these things lest you be X'd, out of the church. And so end times, eschatology, just talking through a lot of different perspectives, which MacArthur and the seminary actually aligns with our eschatology. Yeah. So it's really interesting to discover that as well. I didn't think that was, I had no idea. But nevertheless, to go in there and to be handed a scalpel and say, this is how you divide the Word of God. This is how you understand context. This is how you get to the heart or the meaning of what we call authorial intent. How do you get to the author's intention? That is what the Word is saying. Every single time in every culture and every time in every place, if you can get to the author's intent. And so this single idea revolutionized the way that I look at the Word of God and the way that I preach it. And then I'm digging and digging and digging, trying to figure out what Moses was saying. What did he mean? And if I can get there, then I can minister that to the church even better. Now, they identified he's gifted. Okay, that's great. But again, to take someone who maybe has an athletic ability, but then to put the coach next to him and train them, they become an NBA player. You know what I mean? They go from college, messing around in college, to all of a sudden they can do some pretty amazing things. And so I think that we could set the church on fire in a good way, even more so, through guys being intentional about growing in their understanding of God's Word even more so, and stepping into whatever those circles of training look like for you. If it's a class within your church, if it's an online thing that you're checking out, if it's a book that you're working through, if you have an opportunity to step in, I don't know, to some seminary, and it's a good place, and a lot of great men come out of this place. I think just to throw a giant bomb on the whole thing and say it's not helpful and it doesn't work, is not helpful.
Yeah.
Do people go in there and die? Some do. Yeah, it's true. And it's sad when that happens. They go in there and they become cold and stale and religious and pharisaical, and they don't make it out. But for those who are really, trying to get into ministry and really want to use their giftings for the glory of the Lord and exposit the text correctly, because we got so much bad teaching in this day and age, Mike. I mean, so much bad teaching.
Yeah, well, and I think there's always been bad teaching, but it has more ways of getting out, And just to say a thing, too, I noticed working with younger people, whether it was 3 years of high school or 13 years of college age, they were very hungry for an environment in which they could argue over ideas, talk about them freely without, you know what I'm saying? Like, rather, believe this. This is the truth. Believe it. That's it. Be quiet. Don't ask questions.
Right.
I tried to do this in my classrooms because I appreciated it. Like, if I bring forth an idea, it doesn't necessarily mean I believe it. I'm just, like, I think this text could mean this. Granted, if it does mean this, that could affect this thing or that thing.
Sure.
So what about this? And to say that. And then if I have some support, some other textual support or whatever, I can say that, and then somebody else can respond. And then hopefully a good professor allows some discussion to develop and then guides it in the right direction. And I notice, because especially younger, because a lot of these were third generation Calvary kids, right? And I think a lot of them, they had been grown up and here's the truth, believe it, don't ask questions.
Sure.
And I think for a while, that worked for people. Yeah, sure, I'm good. But I think, part of it too is like we were just saying about the bad teaching. The internet age, it's not just bad. It's like a million bad ideas. Totally. In a million configurations. Right. And some of them sound convincing, and some of them appeal to this group, that group, and a lot of times we're just shouting, yeah, but this over here is the truth, but not showing how this truth defeats or informs or redeems or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like. Right. And or maybe not even highlighting, hey, they actually have a point. Right. This bad philosophy actually has some truth. I mean, every lie has some truth, right? It's not even a good lie if it doesn't have some truth to it. So, I think to not jump to that kind of fear and shut down discussion and argument, but allow them to really come to a reasoned faith. That's good. That isn't just by authority only, but you lead them on a journey of discovery. Again, I'm still pointing them to objective biblical truth, grounded in authorial intent, both divine and human, because it's dual authorship. Totally. But at the, you know what I'm saying? Like I saw like lights come on in their eyes, because a lot of them had, they knew what they ought to say. Yeah. They knew what the Calvary position was. Sure. But they weren't convinced by it. Right. They could regurgitate it, but they didn't necessarily believe it. And so to have a classroom, which was the Bible college, an environment where we could do that. So I think you can do that anywhere. Totally. I don't think it has to be expensive. I don't think it has to be accredited. You know what I mean? So that's my thing. Learning communities. Yes. Where you can do that. That's so really however good. You want to do it. And just for the record too, like I'm pointing out with a fellow Calvary guy, hey, we could do some things better. Yes. I've been in like cessationist, anti-dispensational, anti-charismatic, like I've been there. Yeah. And I will first highlight what we do well. Huh. I'm like, yes, but you guys don't identify gifted people. Right. You just equip people and throw them in there, and they're not gifted or called, or maybe they've been equipped with bad stuff. Totally. So like that, I jump like, dude, we are good at this. Right. Like, cause they're all ticked that the bigger churches are the charismatic church. Right. You're a little jealous, right? And again, they have some points. Yes, we put forward gifted people. They draw a crowd, but then unfortunately they're teaching garbage. Sure. They're not equipped. At best, they're shallow. And then the character often doesn't match. So they destroy all that they've built. So they have some, but I jump first to look what we do well. Totally. You guys, you might be established. You have the seminaries. You have all this history of learning, but you could learn from us. Right. Right. So it just kind of depends on who I'm talking to. Yeah. And again, balance, right? Like Calvary's. Yes. We used to always talk about we wanted to be balanced. Right. And that we were not opposed to denominations as such, only the overemphasis that has led to the division of the body of Christ. That was like classic statement. Wow. The Costa Mesa Bulletin. And I kind of feel like, do we still have that ethos? Right. Like, we're not against denominations. Just over again, well, hopefully we're still not against that, and hopefully we are not now. It's good. Overemphasizing things that divide the body of Christ. The very thing we said was a core value. No, it's good, Mike. When you're young, it's fun to draw lines of tribes, and I don't know, you love your gang, you love your camp, you love your family. Yep. Nothing wrong with that. Yeah, and what I think I've grown to discover, maybe even coming here to LA, is that I've met so many different types of Christians, and I've also been loved by so many different type of Christians, which you figure you're from that camp, so you wouldn't like genuinely love me, genuinely serve me, or because you're from that camp. So, I don't really know if the Spirit of God's really in you, and I don't know if you're really a brother. But then when that happens, and you're like, oh my gosh, like you're a real brother, Jesus loves you the same as he loves me. And that really has broken the mold in my mind. I love something John Corson said a long time ago to us boys. We're like 20 years old, and he's like, if you see a tree bearing fruit, don't cut it down. Just pick from the tree and eat of it. Yep. If the tree is not bearing fruit, cut it down. Obviously, if it's a false religion or a false teacher or a false prophet, cut it down, of course. But if a tree is bearing fruit, if there's a brother or a sister in Christ
we can't be pulling out the axe and cutting each other down. We need,
and even if you disagree on a secondary thing with a brother, a Christian, you can't treat them like they're not a Christian on the basis of a difference of secondary belief. And I had kind of a cool experience, and again, I would check it by Scripture, but when I was in Wales, I'll never forget one of the American missionaries there brought me up to an all-city prayer meeting, and we were sitting on a hill overlooking the city of Cardiff, and they sat us down into prayer circles, and it sounds like the beginning of a joke. I got sat next to an Anglican, a Presbyterian, a Methodist, a Baptist, and a Pentecostal. And my first thought is, oh my gosh, which argument should we get in first, right? Like this is, and then I literally was blown away at what happened. One by one, everyone started praying the exact same thing. For God to pour out his Holy Spirit on the great city and to convert sinners from their sins, because if God doesn't do that, all of our denominational differences don't even matter.
Wow, praise God.
Like mode of baptism, does that even matter if there's no candidate for baptism?
Wow.
Nobody, right? Like these are, as important as that is.
We don't even get to
There's
argue
nobody to baptize. Doesn't matter, right? Nobody's there.
Wow.
So yeah, and again, I'm not denying the differences, and that but you know what I'm saying? It's like, and again, I would take that experience back to Scripture, sola scriptura, compare my experience by the Word of God. So I'm not, being hyper experientialist, but I do think God uses experiences like Peter, right? And the vision of the sheet coming down from, like, God had to experience this thing in order to revision his theology, right? Like God saying, hey, Peter, there's going to be some Gentiles coming, and there's no way you're letting them into your house, because that's just not what good, pious Jews do.
Right.
So I'm going to give you this experience, this vision first, that's going to show you and prepare you for this thing that it's grounded in truth, biblical revelation, but you're not going to be able to deal with it until you experience this. So it was one of those things where it made me realize, wow, again, what's the thing that holds us all together? It's the simple truth of Jesus Christ, the gospel. Jesus Christ is Lord.
Yes.
He's come into the world to save sinners, of whom I am chief. After that, if you believe that, you're born again, confess with your mouth, believe with your heart, right?
Yes.
Saved. That means you're a family, you're a brother, sister.
Yes.
And any argument we have after that is a family argument.
Yeah.
So do so with, and you can have them, and it's good.
Totally.
Right? But it's kind of like C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity, where he's like, I'm not here to debate all the different rooms in the hall. I'm simply here to introduce you to the great hallway of faith.
Amen.
Where God sorts you out. I'm going to go in the Baptist door. I'm going to go in the Calvary door. I'm going to go in the, again, not to wishy-washy the secondaries, but I do think in American evangelicalism, we tend to major on the minors.
Yes.
And the majors unfortunately become minors, and that is a great error.
Yeah, I mean, we may, I don't even like to use the word divide, but we may not do church the same way as another church down the street. But we are united in Christ, and we all have the same mission. We want people to come to know Jesus, and just because we baptize differently, or because, we hold the different positions on the gifts of the Spirit, or we hold the different eschatologies. Like these things, we can't be burning other churches down over this. Like the enemy is like laughing his tail off, just like, look at these Christians, they can't unite over anything, that's why they'll never get anything done, and it's, I see the denominations almost wrapped up in the 12 disciples, it's like, they all have different ways. They have different ways of thinking. They have different personalities. They would argue amongst each other who's going to be the greatest. Jesus, brings them back to the center, brings them back to the core over and over again. I think we think that the disciples were all in one denomination. And I think if you watch their letters and their teachings spread out over hundreds of years, you'll find these different methods and or ways of doing it is what has created this kaleidoscope of the Church of Jesus Christ worldwide. But while they were united under Christ, the Lord Jesus, in that discipleship, and went and started the book of Acts, or planted all of these churches, and the writing of the book of Acts took place, all this history of the beginning of the church, the divisions, were called out. These things were talked about. There was a lot of conversation, and there was a fight to try and get back to the center. And that's what I'm growing in. That's what I'm growing to see more and more. Is I love I used to fight with the brothers when I was young, and now I love the discussion. I really enjoy, just having a mature conversation with other believers, talking through the scriptures, talking through methods, talking through why, and trying to answer this problem, the problems that we have in the church, problems that we have in culture, and really trying to figure out how we can get back to Jesus and be united so we can take this place by storm, for His glory. And it's a joy when that happens. It's a joy when brothers fellowship, get together, grow together. Man, Mike, we have been chatting for a long time.
Yeah, I think so.
And we haven't even really get into church planning and all of this kind of stuff, but we should jump in and come back again sometime and talk some more about this. I think it'd be fun.
I think so.
And marriage and family and all of that. I mean, we touched on some of these things, which I'm very thankful, but I think we should probably go get some lunch. What do you say?
I could use a good bite to eat.
Mike, dude, Pastor Mike Chaddick, where can people find you?
imagechurchoc.com. That's our church website. Sermons there, Sunday service time, and we are going to be launching a podcast sometime soon.
Exciting.
So we'll let people know when that's ready to go, but something we're excited about, praying for. So
awesome, man. Awesome.
We'll get out the word.
Yeah. No, I was just reflecting on our talk. I'm like, I don't know if you're already doing it, Mike, but you got to write or articles or podcast. I mean, just the way that you put ideas together and the way that you articulate them is so helpful to the body. It's helpful to the brothers. It's a gift, man. It's part of your superpower. So please, continue doing that. Thanks for blessing me. Thanks for blessing our church.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks for coming on the podcast. Let's go get some lunch.
Let's do it.
Amen.